The night my own son stole my retirement check, he looked me straight in the eyes, smiled, and asked if I wanted another slice of apple pie. 10 minutes later, my check was gone, and he calmly suggested I was probably getting forgetful at my age. Everyone at the table believed him except me. They thought I was just an old widow who had missed what happened. What none of them knew was that my phone had quietly recorded every single word they said after they thought I wasn't listening. And before this was over, those words would cost my son far more than he ever imagined. If you've ever been hurt by someone you trusted, I'd love to hear your story. Please like this video if stories like mine remind you that the truth always matters. Subscribe if you enjoy emotional family dramas with unexpected twists. And before we begin, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I read as many of your comments as I can, and they always remind me that none of us are truly alone. For most of my life, I believed the worst thing that could happen to a mother was losing her husband. I was wrong. Sometimes the deeper grief comes when the child you carried, raised, defended, and forgave looks at you not like a mother anymore, but like an obstacle standing between him and money. My name is Stephanie Wilson. I was 68 years old when everything happened, though. Most days, I still felt like that 23-year-old nurse who first walked into Riverside Methodist Hospital in Columbus, Ohio, wearing white shoes that hurt my feet and carrying a lunch my mother packed for me in a brown paper bag. I spent 36 years as a nurse. I worked night shifts, double shifts, holidays, weekends, and snowstorms. I held the hands of strangers when their own families could not make it in time. I learned to read fear in a patient's eyes before they said a word. I learned that pain had many voices, and not all of them made noise. But nothing in all those years prepared me for the quiet pain of sitting alone at my kitchen table after my husband died. My husband, Richard, passed away 3 years before the night of the dinner. He had been a high school history teacher, the kind of man who folded receipts, neatly sharpened pencils with a pocket knife, and remembered everyone's birthday without needing a calendar reminder. We bought our little 2-story house in Westerville when our son Ethan was still in diapers. The mortgage had taken us nearly 28 years to pay off, but the day we made that final payment, Richard stood on the front porch, held the envelope in the air, and said, "Steph, nobody can push us out now." I laughed then. I didn't know how much those words would matter later. After Richard died, the house became both my comfort and my punishment. His recliner was still by the living room window. His coffee mug sat in the cabinet with the little chip on the rim. His old Cleveland Browns sweatshirt stayed folded in the bottom drawer because I couldn't bring myself to donate it. Every corner held a memory, and every memory seemed to ask why I was still here without him. Ethan lived about 25 minutes away with his wife Melissa and their daughter Lily. He was 42, tall like his father, with the same brown eyes that used to melt me when he was a little boy asking for one more bedtime story. But somewhere over the years, those eyes had changed. They had grown sharper, more restless, less kind. I told myself it was stress. Mothers are experts at explaining away the things that hurt us. Ethan worked in residential remodeling. At least, that was what he told people. He always had some project going, some client who had not paid him yet, some supplier who was charging too much, some employee who had quit at the worst possible time. Every conversation with him eventually circled back to how hard things were for him. And I helped. Of course I helped. When his truck broke down, I gave him $2,000. When Lily needed braces, I paid the deposit. When Melissa said their property taxes had gone up, I mailed a check and told myself Richard would have done the same. But after Richard's funeral, Ethan started coming around less and less. At first, he called every Sunday, then every other Sunday, then mostly on holidays. Sometimes weeks passed without hearing from him unless he needed something. I pretended not to notice because admitting your only child has drifted away feels like failing a test nobody told you were taking. Then about 2 months before that dinner, something changed. Ethan started calling almost every day. "Just checking on you, Mom," he would say. The first time I nearly cried after hanging up. I thought maybe grief had finally softened him. Maybe he had realized I was alone in that house. Maybe he missed me. Then he came by on a Tuesday afternoon with flowers from the grocery store. Not a holiday, not my birthday, just a Tuesday. Melissa came with him wearing a cream sweater and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We've been worried about you," she said, stepping inside before I fully opened the door. That sentence should have comforted me. Instead, it made something cold move through my chest. They walked around the house as if they were inspecting it. Ethan paused near the staircase and looked up at the ceiling. "Place still in good shape," he said, "for its age." I smiled politely. "Your father took care of it." He nodded, but his eyes were on the crown molding, then the hardwood floors, then the dining room built-ins. Melissa ran her finger over the edge of my kitchen counter. "You know, homes in this area are selling for a lot right now." I looked at her. "I'm not selling." She laughed quickly. "Oh, I didn't mean that. I just meant you're lucky." "Lucky?" That word stayed with me after they left. A week later, Ethan called and asked if I had updated my beneficiaries. Beneficiaries, I said. Yeah, accounts, retirement insurance, just practical stuff. You're getting older, Mom. We should know where everything is. We. Not you. We. I told him I had everything handled. He got quiet for a few seconds. I'm just trying to help, he said, with that wounded tone children use when they want a mother to feel guilty. And it worked. For a while. The questions kept coming. How much was my Social Security each month? Did my pension come by direct deposit or check? Was Richard's life insurance all spent? Did I still keep paperwork in the old filing cabinet upstairs? Had I ever considered adding his name to my checking account just in case? Each question came wrapped in concern, but concern can be used like gift paper around a knife. I began sleeping badly. I would wake around 3 in the morning and stare at the ceiling, hearing Richard's voice in my memory. Steph, don't sign anything you don't understand. Richard had always been careful. Some people thought he was too careful. But he had grown up poor in Southern Ohio, the oldest of 5 children, and he believed money was not about greed. It was about protection. One Saturday morning, Ethan stopped by alone. He said he wanted to fix the loose railing on my back steps. I made coffee while he went outside with his toolbox. Through the kitchen window, I could see him on the patio phone pressed to his ear, pacing hard. At first, I didn't mean to listen. Then I heard him say, I said I'll get it. Just give me until the end of the month. His voice was low, angry, afraid. He turned his back toward the window. No, you don't understand. I can't have Melissa find out about that part. My hand froze on the coffee pot. Then he said, my mother has money. She just acts like she doesn't. I stepped back from the window so quickly my hip bumped the counter. My mother has money. Not Mom. My mother. Like I was a resource, a solution, a thing. When he came back inside, his face was pleasant again. Too pleasant. Railing's fine now, he said. I poured his coffee with steady hands, but inside something had shifted. Not broken yet, but loosened, like the first crack in ice before the whole lake gives way. That night, I sat at Richard's old desk and opened the bottom drawer where he used to keep instruction manuals, warranty papers, and envelopes labeled in his neat handwriting. I found the folder marked Stephanie Important. Inside were copies of bank information insurance policies, the deed to the house, and a note Richard had written before his surgery years earlier. Steph. If anything ever happens to me, do not let anyone rush you, not even family, especially not family if money is involved. Love them, but keep your name on what we built. I pressed the paper to my chest and cried like he had died all over again. The next morning, I did something I had never done before. I downloaded a voice recorder app onto my phone. I felt foolish at first, like some suspicious old woman in a television drama. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself Ethan was simply stressed. I told myself no son would steal from his own mother. But the nurse in me knew better. People in pain do desperate things. People in debt do cruel things. And people who believe an elderly woman will stay quiet can become very bold. The app was simple. One button. Record. Stop. Save. I practiced using it while sitting at my kitchen table. I recorded the ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, my own voice saying, "This is Stephanie Wilson." Then I played it back. Clear as day. I almost deleted the app. Then Ethan called. "Mom," he said warmly, "why don't you come over for dinner this weekend? Melissa's making pot roast. Lily's been asking about you." My heart softened at Lily's name. Lily was 17, quiet smart with Richard's love of books and my stubborn chin. She was the one pure thing left in that branch of the family. If she wanted to see me, I would go. "That sounds nice," I said. "Great," Ethan replied. "And maybe bring that retirement check you mentioned. I can help you deposit it online. Save you a trip to the bank." I stood perfectly still in the hallway. The check had arrived that morning. I had not told him that, not one word. My fingers tightened around the phone. "How did you know it came?" I asked. There was a pause, so small most people would have missed it. "Oh," he said lightly. "You must have mentioned it last week." I had not. But I did not argue. I looked toward Richard's desk, toward the folder still lying open toward the phone in my hand. Then I said, "All right, Ethan, I'll bring it." And for the first time in my life, I understood that loving someone did not mean trusting them with your blindfold on. That Saturday before I left for my son's house, I placed the retirement check inside my purse, slipped my phone into the pocket of my cardigan, and made sure the little red recording button was ready. I still hoped I was wrong. That is the saddest part. Even walking into the house where my son was preparing to betray me, a part of me was still praying he would prove me wrong. By Saturday afternoon, I had changed my blouse 3 times. That may sound silly for a woman my age, especially when all I was doing was having dinner at my son's house, but grief had made me particular about small things. After Richard died, I learned that when you cannot control the emptiness in your home, you start controlling what you can. The blouse, the earrings, the way you fold a napkin, the time you leave so you do not arrive too early and look lonely. I finally chose a soft blue cardigan over a white blouse, the one Richard used to say made my eyes look brighter. I pinned my silver hair back with a pearl clip, put on a little lipstick, and stood in front of the hallway mirror longer than necessary. "You're being ridiculous, Stephanie," I whispered to myself. But my hands were cold. The retirement check was inside my purse, tucked in the inner zippered pocket. I had placed it inside an envelope first, then folded a receipt around it as if paper could protect it from betrayal. My phone was in the right pocket of my cardigan, fully charged. Before leaving, I opened the recorder app, stared at the red button, and then locked the screen. Not yet, I told myself. I still wanted to believe this was all a misunderstanding. I wanted to believe Ethan had somehow guessed the check had arrived. I wanted to believe his sudden attention came from love and not need. Wanting to believe something I later learned is not the same as having a reason to believe it. The drive to Ethan's neighborhood took 25 minutes. He and Melissa lived in a newer development outside Dublin, where every house had stone accents, black shutters, and lawns so neat they looked ironed. Their home was bigger than mine, with a 3-car garage and a front porch nobody ever seemed to sit on. Richard used to say houses like that looked built for photographs, not families. When I pulled into the driveway, Ethan came out before I even turned off the engine. "Mom," he called, smiling wide. "You made it." He opened my car door and reached for my purse. "I've got that," I said, keeping the strap over my shoulder. His hand paused in the air for half a second. Then he laughed. Still independent as ever. "I learned from your father." Something flickered across his face when I said that, but it disappeared quickly. He kissed my cheek, smelling faintly of aftershave and stress. Inside, Melissa was arranging rolls in a basket, like she was setting up for a magazine shoot. The dining room table was already laid out with cloth napkins, candles, and the good white plates she normally reserved for holidays. A pot roast smell filled the house, rich and buttery, the kind of smell that should have made me feel welcome. Instead, I noticed everything. My purse hook by the entryway was gone. Usually, Melissa had a little brass stand where guests hung coats and bags. That night, there was nothing. "Let me take your cardigan," Melissa said, stepping toward me. "I'm fine," I answered. She smiled. "You'll get warm. I'll manage." Her smile tightened. From the hallway, Lily appeared in jeans and an oversized Ohio State sweatshirt. She had grown taller since I had last seen her, all long limbs and quiet eyes. When she saw me, her face softened in a way that nearly broke my heart. "Grandma," she said, hurrying over. I hugged her tightly. "There's my girl." She held on longer than usual. Over her shoulder, I saw Ethan watching us. "Lily's been asking about you all week," he said. Lily pulled back, but she did not smile at him. "Yeah," she said softly. "I missed you." There was something in her voice, not just love, warning. Dinner began pleasantly enough. Ethan carved the roast. Melissa poured iced tea into tall glasses. Lily sat across from me and kept her hands folded in her lap. For the first 15 minutes, we talked about normal things. Lily's senior year, the college applications she was considering, a neighbor's dog that kept getting loose, the cold weather coming in early that year. Then Ethan reached for the wine bottle. "Mom, just a little?" he asked. "No, thank you." "Come on," Melissa said lightly. "1 glass won't hurt. I'm taking medication for my blood pressure." Ethan lowered the bottle, but his jaw shifted. "Since when?" "Since Dr. Howard prescribed it." "You never told me that." I looked at him carefully. "You never asked." The silence lasted only a moment, but I felt it like a draft under a door. Melissa cleared her throat. "Well, that's exactly why we worry. You're dealing with all these things alone. I'm not helpless, Melissa." "Oh, no one said helpless." She picked up her fork. "Just older." Lily's eyes snapped to her mother. Ethan leaned back and gave me his soft voice, the one he used when he wanted something. "Mom, we only want to make sure you're protected." "Protected from what?" Lifey said with a little laugh. "Bills, scams, mistakes. People take advantage of seniors all the time." I almost laughed then, not because it was funny, but because the cruelty of it was so bold I could hardly breathe. "Yes," I said. "They do." Ethan did not hear the edge in my voice, or he chose to ignore it. So he continued, "Did you bring that check?" There it was. Not, "How are you really doing?" Not, "Are you lonely in that house?" Not, "Do you need help with anything?" Just the check. I set my fork down carefully. I did. Melissa's eyes dropped briefly toward my purse, which was tucked beside my chair, the strap looped around my ankle. Ethan smiled. "Great. After dinner, I can show you how to deposit it with your phone. You just sign the back, take a picture, and it's done. I usually go to the bank. That's old-fashioned. It has worked for me." "Mom." He sighed as if patience was a gift he was growing tired of giving. You don't need to drive around carrying checks at your age. My age seems to be very popular tonight. Lily looked down at her plate, but I saw the corner of her mouth twitch, not quite a smile. Ethan did not appreciate it. We're trying to help, he said. So you've said. Melissa reached for the rolls. You know, Stephanie, there's nothing wrong with letting family step in. My mother added my sister to all her accounts. It made things easier. Easier for whom I asked. Her hand stopped over the basket. Ethan gave a quick laugh. Okay, let's not turn dinner into a courtroom. Then stop questioning me like I'm on the witness stand. For the first time that night, Ethan's mask slipped. It was quick, just a flash of irritation, but it was enough. The same sharpness I had seen through my kitchen window when he was on the phone. Then Lily suddenly stood. I need more water, she said. I'll get it, Melissa said. No, I can. Lily picked up her glass and moved toward the kitchen. As she passed behind my chair, her fingers brushed my shoulder. A second later, something small dropped into my lap, a folded napkin. I looked down. My heart began to pound. I kept my hand over it until Melissa glanced away. Then under the table, I opened it just enough to see the words Lily had written in pencil. Don't leave your purse alone. The room blurred for a moment. I lifted my eyes to Lily. She was standing by the sink filling her glass, but she was not looking at me. Her shoulders were tense, too tense for a 17-year-old girl getting water. My grandson did not exist. My brothers were gone. My husband was dead. And in that moment, the only person in that house trying to protect me was a child who still had braces on her bottom teeth. I slid the napkin into my cardigan pocket right beside my phone. Then I pressed the red button. The tiny vibration against my hip felt like a heartbeat. Recording. When Lily returned to the table, Ethan was talking about home values. Honestly, Mom, your place is probably worth more than you think, he said. That area has exploded. I'm aware. You're sitting on equity. I'm sitting in my home. Melissa smiled thinly. No one's saying you have to sell tomorrow. Tomorrow? She blinked. I mean someday. Ethan jumped in. We're just thinking long term. If anything happened to you, there would be a lot to sort out. The house, the accounts, the retirement funds. It would be easier if I knew where everything was. There it was again. Easier. That word had become their favorite disguise. I took a sip of iced tea. Your father and I handled our affairs. Ethan's voice hardened. Dad's gone. The words landed like a slap. Lily whispered, Dad. He ignored her. I know he's gone, I said quietly. I was holding his hand when he took his last breath. Melissa lowered her eyes, but not from shame. More like impatience. Ethan rubbed his forehead. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Melissa stood with a bright, artificial smile. Stephanie, would you help me with dessert? I made apple pie. I did not want to leave my purse. My ankle tightened around the strap under the table. I'm sure Lily can help, I said. Melissa's smile stayed, but her eyes chilled. I was hoping for a moment with you. Woman to woman. Lily looked terrified. Ethan leaned forward. Mom, your purse is safe. We're family. Those 3 words settled over the table like smoke. We're family. I should have said no, but part of me wanted to test them. Part of me wanted to know the truth, even if it destroyed me. So I stood slowly lifting my purse with me. Melissa's eyes flicked downward. I'll just bring this, I said. Ethan laughed too loudly. Mom, seriously, I looked at him. What? It's dinner, not a bus station. Lily's face went pale. I sat back down, placed the purse beside my chair again, and looped the strap twice around my ankle. Then it should not bother anyone, I said. The rest of dinner passed with smiles that felt painted on. Melissa served apple pie with vanilla ice cream. Ethan asked Lily about college, but his tone was sharp enough that she only gave short answers. Twice, Melissa tried to draw me into the kitchen. Twice, I refused. By the time I stood to leave, I was exhausted from pretending not to know something was wrong. At the door, Ethan hugged me. Too tight. I love you, Mom, he said near my ear. I wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. I love you too, I whispered. Melissa handed me my cardigan, though I had never taken it off. Drive safe. Lily followed me outside. The air was cold and porch lights glowed up and down the street. She walked me to my car without saying anything until we reached the driver's door. Then she grabbed my hand. Grandma, she whispered, her eyes shining. Please check everything when you get home. My throat closed. What do you know, sweetheart? The front door opened behind us. Lily, Ethan called. Inside. She stepped back quickly. I got into my car, started the engine, and looked once at my son standing in the doorway of his beautiful house, smiling like a man who had already won. All the way home, my phone sat in my pocket, still recording. And though I did not know it yet, the most important words of the night would not be spoken while I was at the table. They would be spoken after Ethan thought I was gone. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every red light seemed to hold me in place. Every pair of headlights in my rearview mirror made my shoulders tighten. I kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other pressed lightly against the pocket of my cardigan where my phone was still recording. I did not know why I left it on. Maybe instinct. Maybe fear. Maybe some part of me understood that people reveal the truth only after they think the door has closed behind you. When I reached my house, the porch light was on. I always left it on before going out after dark. Richard had started that habit years ago, saying a lit porch told the world somebody inside was expected back. After he died, I kept doing it because coming home to darkness made the house feel too much like an answer. I parked in the driveway and sat in the car for a long moment. My hands would not move. I looked at my little brick house, the white trim Richard repainted every few summers, the maple tree he planted when Ethan was 10, the upstairs window that used to be my son's bedroom. There was a time when Ethan would press his face to that window, waiting for me to come home from the hospital after a late shift. He would run downstairs in pajamas and wrap his arms around my waist like I was the whole world. That boy had existed. I know he had. And that is what made everything hurt worse. I finally stepped out of the car, locked it twice, and walked inside. The house smelled faintly of lemon furniture polish and the lavender candle I had blown out before leaving. Everything was exactly where I had left it, but I felt like I had entered someone else's life. I set my purse on the kitchen table. For several seconds, I only stared at it. Then I opened the main compartment. My wallet was there. Tissues. Reading glasses. A peppermint Lily had given me weeks earlier. A church bulletin from Sunday. I unzipped the inner pocket where I had placed the envelope. Empty. I checked again. Then again. My fingers pushed into the corners as if the check might have folded itself into a seam. I removed everything from the purse and laid it across the table in little desperate piles. Lipstick, keys, a grocery receipt, hand lotion, a pen, my Medicare card. The check was gone. A sound came out of me, but it did not feel like my voice. It was not a sob. Not yet. It was the sound a person makes when the last excuse collapses. I sat down slowly because my knees had gone weak. Nearly $3,900. That was not a fortune to some people, but to me it was security. It was medication, utilities, groceries, property taxes, the little cushion that let me sleep at night without wondering whether I would become a burden. It was mine, earned by decades of aching feet, skipped holidays, and patients whose names I still remembered. And my son had taken it at dinner. My son. I picked up my phone with shaking hands. The recorder was still running. I stopped it. Saved the file automatically without listening, and then stared at Ethan's contact photo. It was an old picture, one from a family barbecue before Richard got sick. Ethan was smiling with his arm around Lily, looking like a father, a son, a man a person could trust. I called him. He answered on the fourth ring. "Hey, Mom. You home?" His voice was casual. Too casual. "Yes," I said. "I'm home." "Good." "Roads okay?" I closed my eyes. "Ethan, my retirement check is missing." There was a small pause. Not shock. A pause. "What do you mean missing? I mean it was in my purse when I came to your house and now it's gone." He exhaled. "Mom." Just that one word, heavy with disappointment, as if I had inconvenienced him by noticing. "Did you see it?" I asked. "No. Why would I see it? Because you asked me to bring it." "I asked so I could help you deposit it. You never gave it to me." "I know I didn't." "Then maybe you left it at home. I checked before I left. Maybe you moved it and forgot." His voice had shifted. Softer. Slower. The way some people speak to children or the very old. My fingers tightened around the phone. "Do not talk to me that way. I'm not talking anyway. I'm trying to understand." "No, you're trying to make me doubt myself." Another pause. Then he laughed once, short and humorless. "That's a pretty serious accusation. It's a serious situation. Mom, you're upset. You're tired. You had a long evening. I did not misplace that check." "Well, what do you want me to say?" He snapped, the warmth gone. "You brought your purse into the dining room like you thought we were going to rob you. Maybe you dropped it somewhere while you were doing all that." The words hit their mark because they revealed something. He had been watching my purse the whole time. Before I could answer, I heard Melissa in the background. "What's wrong?" Ethan covered the phone poorly. "She says her check is missing." Melissa's voice came closer. "Oh, for heaven's sake." Then Ethan came back. "Melissa wants to talk to you." "I don't want to talk to Melissa." But he put her on anyway. "Stephanie," she said with a sigh already built into my name, "I'm sorry, but this is exactly what we've been worried about." My stomach clenched. What is you losing track of things? Getting confused, then panicking. "I am not confused. No one is attacking you. You just accused me of being confused. I said we're worried." There it was again. The beautiful language of control. Worried, helpful, protected, family. Melissa lowered her voice, but not with kindness. You came into our home tonight acting suspicious. You refused wine. You wouldn't take off your cardigan. You kept your purse wrapped around your ankle like some stranger was going to steal from you. That is not normal behavior, Stephanie. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. What is not normal is noticing every one of those things. She went silent. I heard Ethan say something in the background, low and sharp. Melissa returned with a colder tone. Maybe you should talk to your doctor. My doctor has nothing to do with this. I disagree. I looked around my kitchen at the clean counters, the little ceramic rooster Richard bought me at a flea market, the pill organizer by the sink with every dose exactly where it should be. I was not confused. I was not helpless. I was not losing my mind, but they wanted me to sound like I was. That realization chilled me more than the missing money. Put Ethan back on, I said. A rustle. Then my son's voice. Mom, listen. If the check is really gone, call the issuing office Monday and ask if they can cancel it. If I'm just saying, don't make this bigger than it is. Someone took money from me. No one took anything from you. How can you know that? Because we didn't, he said quickly. We. I had only asked him. The word hung between us. Ethan, I said slowly. I never said Melissa took it. Silence. Then he said, you're being paranoid. There it was. Not mistaken, not upset. Paranoid. A word carefully chosen. A word that could be repeated to family, to doctors, to a lawyer, to a judge if it came to that. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I'm going to bed, I said. That's probably best. I hung up before I said something that would make them feel justified. For a long time, I stood in the kitchen with the phone in my hand. Then I turned off the overhead light and walked into the living room. Richard's recliner sat by the window, empty and patient. I lowered myself into it because I could not bear to sit in my own chair. The tears came then. Not loud ones, not dramatic ones. Just hot, steady tears that slipped down my face while the house stayed quiet around me. I cried for the check, yes. But more than that, I cried for every birthday cake I had baked for Ethan, every fever I had nursed, every school play I had attended after a 12-hour shift. I cried for the little boy who once gave me a dandelion and told me it was real gold. I cried because somewhere between that boy and this man, something precious had been lost, and I had spent years pretending I could love it back into existence. Around midnight, I got up and washed my face. The nurse in me returned first. That old, steady part of myself that knew panic did not stop bleeding. Pressure did. Action did. I made tea I did not drink. I took out a notebook from the kitchen drawer and wrote the date at the top. Then I wrote everything I remembered. Time I arrived, where purse was placed, who asked about the check. Melissa's attempts to get me into the kitchen, Lily's warning. Time I left, phone call after returning home. I wrote until my hand cramped. Then I looked at my phone. The recording file sat there with a timestamp and a plain little title made of numbers. It looked harmless. Ordinary. Nothing like the thing that might split my family open. I touched play. At first I heard only the muffled sounds of dinner. Forks against plates, Ethan's voice talking about house values, Melissa asking about dessert, my own voice calm but tight. Then came the sound of the front door opening and closing. My goodbye. Lily's whisper outside was faint but clear enough. Please, check everything when you get home. Then, the car engine in the distance. A long silence. Footsteps. The front door closed again. And then Melissa's voice sharp and bare without the sweetness she had worn at the table. She knows. My breath stopped. Ethan answered farther from the phone, but still clear. She doesn't know anything. She suspects. That's different. The room around me disappeared. I sat frozen in Richard's chair, phone in my lap, listening as my son spoke in a voice I had never heard before. No love, no guilt, only calculation. Melissa said, She wouldn't even let go of the purse. Ethan laughed. But she still brought it, didn't she? I covered my mouth. There it was. There was no misunderstanding now. No misplaced envelope, no old age forgetfulness, no innocent confusion. Melissa said, What if she calls the bank? She can call whoever she wants. Ethan replied, By Monday, it'll be handled. My heart began beating so hard I could hear it. Then, Melissa asked, And if she tells people Ethan's answer came smoothly? Then we tell them what we already planned. Mom's been slipping, forgetting things, acting paranoid. Tonight proved it. I pressed the phone harder against my ear. Melissa gave a small laugh. She did look crazy with that purse around her ankle. Ethan said, Exactly. Let her accuse us. The more upset she gets, the easier this becomes. I stopped the recording. The room was silent again, but I was not the same woman who had pressed play. A few minutes earlier, I had been a heartbroken mother hoping for some explanation that would hurt less than the truth. Now I was a witness. And my son had just given me the first piece of evidence. I did not sleep that night. I sat in Richard's recliner until the sky outside the living room window turned from black to gray, listening to the recording again and again until every word felt carved into the inside of my skull. She knows. She doesn't know anything. She suspects. That's different. By Monday, it'll be handled. Mom's been slipping, forgetting things, acting paranoid. Each sentence landed differently the more I heard it. The first time I had listened like a wounded mother, searching for some hidden softness in Ethan's voice, some hesitation, some regret. By the fourth time, I listened like the nurse I used to be, paying attention to details. Tone, timing, intent, the pauses between words. By the seventh time, I stopped crying. That frightened me a little. There is a kind of pain that makes you break down, and there is another kind that makes you very, very still. By morning, I had entered the second kind. I made coffee at 6:30, though it tasted bitter and cold by the time I remembered to drink it. I placed my phone on the kitchen table, opened my notebook again, and wrote down the exact phrases from the recording. Not summaries, exact words. I had learned long ago that people who lie like to hide inside vague language. They will say you misunderstood. They will say they were joking. They will say emotions made you exaggerate. So I wrote the words exactly as they were spoken. At 7:15, Ethan called. I stared at his name glowing on my screen until it stopped. He called again at 7:20. Then came a text. Morning, Mom. Hope you're feeling better. Sorry things got emotional last night. Let's not make a big deal out of this before we know what happened. I read it 3 times. Before we know what happened. He already knew. Another text followed. Melissa thinks maybe you should check the car. Maybe the envelope fell out. Then another. Also, please don't start calling people. You know how family talks. That one almost made me smile. Not because it was funny, but because fear has a smell. I had smelled it in hospital rooms when patients knew the test results were worse than they had hoped. I had smelled it on relatives who were about to be caught in a lie. Ethan's text carried that same scent. He was not worried about my missing check. He was worried about who I might tell. I typed one sentence. I'm tired today. I'll look again later. I did not mention the recording. I did not accuse him. I did not ask questions. Then I put the phone face down and whispered, Not yet. The urge to confront him was almost physical. I wanted to call him back and say I heard you. I heard everything. I wanted to hear panic in his voice. I wanted him to understand what he had done. I wanted him to feel even a fraction of the humiliation he had tried to pour over me. But anger is impatient and justice requires patience. Richard used to say that when he taught history. The people who win are not always the loudest in the first hour, Steph. Sometimes they're the ones who keep records. So I kept records. I saved the recording in 3 places. First on my phone, then I emailed it to myself. Then, because I did not entirely trust technology, I uploaded it to a private cloud folder Lily had helped me set up the year before when she was teaching me how to store photos. For the file name, I did not write Ethan Stealing Check. I called it Dinner Audio, Saturday. Plain, clean, factual. After that, I listened again, this time from the beginning. The earlier part of the recording captured the dinner conversation more clearly than I expected. Ethan's questions about the check. Melissa asking whether I had considered adding family to my accounts. Their remarks about my age. My refusal to drink wine. Lily's warning was faint, but audible enough if you knew what to listen for. Then, after I left, the real conversation began. I played that part with my notebook open. Melissa. She knows. Ethan. She doesn't know anything. She suspects. That's different. Melissa. She wouldn't even let go of the purse. Ethan. But she still brought it, didn't she? Melissa. What if she calls the bank Ethan? She can call whoever she wants. By Monday, it'll be handled. Melissa. And if she tells people Ethan, then we tell them what we already planned. Mom's been slipping, forgetting things, acting paranoid. Tonight proved it. I stopped the recording there and rubbed my temples. That alone was enough to make me sick. But there was more. I had stopped listening the night before because my heart could not take another word. In the gray light of morning with coffee going cold beside me, I forced myself to continue. After Melissa laughed about my purse, there was the sound of a chair scraping. Ethan's footsteps moved closer to where my phone must have been when it was still recording from my cardigan pocket before I left. The sound shifted, muffled, then clearer. Melissa said I don't like Lily watching everything. Ethan answered. She's a kid. She's 17. She won't do anything. She warned her. I saw it. My fingers tightened around the pen. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Then I'll talk to her." Melissa replied, "Don't scare her." I said I'll talk to her. The way he said it made the hair on my arms rise. Lily, my sweet Lily. Until that moment, I had been thinking like a mother betrayed. Now I began thinking like a grandmother afraid. If Ethan believed Lily was a threat, what would he do? Would he punish her? Take her phone. Keep her from seeing me. Tell her she had imagined things too. I wrote Lily's name in the notebook and underlined it. Then the recording continued. Melissa's voice dropped lower. "What about the other account I set up?" Ethan said, "What other account? Don't play dumb. The one your dad supposedly set up, the one she never talks about." There was silence. Then Ethan said, "I don't know where that is yet." Yet. That one word made my stomach clench. Melissa said, "You told me there was more. There is more. Dad was too careful not to leave something. Mom just hides behind that innocent little old lady act." I nearly dropped the pen. Innocent little old lady act? I had worked 36 years in a hospital. I had stretched paychecks, raised a child, sat through Richard's chemo appointments, handled insurance forms, refinanced our mortgage, planned a funeral, and kept a household running alone. Yet in Ethan's mind, I was either helpless or manipulative, depending on which version benefited him. Melissa said, "We need the check first, then the paperwork." Ethan replied, "I know. What if she won't sign? She will. How?" There was a pause long enough that I leaned closer to the phone. Then Ethan said, "Pressure. Family. Doctor if we need one." "People believe what they already expect to believe." Melissa laughed softly. "That old people get confused." Exactly. I closed my eyes. It was not only theft, it was a plan. They had not just stolen a check. They were building a story around me, a story where I was unstable, forgetful, paranoid, incapable. And once enough people accepted that story, everything I said would sound like proof of it. If I cried, I was emotional. If I got angry, I was unstable. If I accused them, I was paranoid. If I stayed silent, they would move forward. That was when I understood the trap. I pushed back from the table and walked to the sink. Outside, the maple leaves moved in the cold morning wind. For a few seconds, I watched them shake loose from the branches and scatter across the lawn Richard used to rake every October. "Okay," I whispered. My voice sounded different. Lower. Firmer. "Okay." I went upstairs to the small bedroom Richard had used as an office. The room still smelled faintly of old paper and cedar. His filing cabinet stood against the wall, the same gray metal one he refused to replace because, as he put it, ugly things are harder to steal. I opened the drawer labeled Bank Dad Retirement and House. Inside were folders arranged with the kind of care that used to make me tease him. But that morning I silently thanked him for every label, every duplicate, every note. I found the pension documents, Social Security letters, tax returns, bank statements, the deed to the house, insurance paperwork. Nothing was missing. Then I found an older folder in the back. Richard had written on the tab, "Personal, Stephanie only." My chest tightened. I sat on the floor and opened it carefully. Inside were copies of our wills, a letter from an attorney named David Harper, and a sealed envelope with my name on it in Richard's handwriting. For a moment, I could not open it. Some grief waits for you in drawers. You think you have survived it, and then your husband's handwriting finds you on a Sunday morning. I pressed the envelope against my lap and breathed until the room steadied. Then I opened it. Steph, if you are reading this because you are scared, slow down. You always move too fast when you're scared. Read everything. Call David if needed. Do not let Ethan or anyone else rush you into signing papers. I love our son, but love is not the same as blind trust. Protect yourself first. I read the letter twice. Richard had known something. Maybe not the exact betrayal. Maybe not this check, this dinner, this recording. But he had seen enough of Ethan's selfishness to leave me a warning. That hurt almost as much as the theft, because it meant I had not been blind alone. Richard had worried too. Downstairs, my phone buzzed again. A text from Ethan. "Mom, I'm coming by later to help you look. Don't call the bank yet. They'll just make it complicated." I stared at the message. Don't call the bank yet. There was the urgency. The clock. Monday. He needed time, which meant I had very little of it. I placed Richard's letter back into the folder, but I kept David Harper's contact information out. Then I gathered my bank documents, my ID, and my notebook. I put them in a canvas tote instead of my purse. My purse suddenly felt contaminated by what had happened. Before leaving the house, I stood in the hallway and looked at the family photos on the wall. Ethan at age 6, missing 2 front teeth. Ethan at high school graduation, Richard's hand on his shoulder. Ethan holding newborn Lily in the hospital, looking terrified and proud. I touched the frame lightly. "I don't know where I lost you," I whispered, "but I won't let you bury me while I'm still breathing." At 10 o'clock, I called the issuing office listed on the check stub. My voice shook only once. I reported the check missing and asked whether it had been cashed or deposited. The woman on the line told me it had not cleared yet, but she could place a note on the file and advise me to contact my bank immediately. Then I called Karen Brooks. Karen had been one of my closest friends from the hospital years. She had left nursing after a back injury and eventually became a branch manager at Buckeye Community Bank. She was practical, direct, and not easily shocked. When she answered, I tried to sound calm. "Karen, it's Stephanie Wilson." "Steph, honey, what's wrong?" That was all it took. My voice cracked. "My retirement check is missing," I said, "and I think Ethan took it." Karen did not gasp. She did not ask if I was sure. She simply said, "Come to the bank. Bring everything." I looked down at the phone in my hand at the recording that had changed me from a grieving mother into a woman with evidence. "I have audio," I said. Karen's voice lowered. "Then bring that too." I hung up, locked my front door, and stepped onto the porch. The morning air was cold, but I felt something burning underneath my ribs now. Not rage exactly. Rage is wild. This was cleaner than rage. Resolve. Ethan thought by Monday it would be handled. He was right about one thing. By Monday something would be handled. But it would not be me. Monday morning arrived with a heavy gray sky hanging over Columbus, the kind that made the world feel quieter than usual. I left the house before 8. For the first time in years, I locked every window before leaving. Not because I thought someone would break in while I was gone, but because something inside me had changed. Trust had always been the lock on my life. Now I realized locks only worked when people respected them. As I drove toward Buckeye Community Bank, I kept checking my rearview mirror. Old habits. When I worked as a nurse, I learned that once danger enters your life, your mind keeps searching for it long after the emergency has passed. I parked near the side entrance. Karen Brooks was already waiting inside. She looked almost exactly the way I remembered from our hospital days. Her hair had turned silver instead of blonde, but her posture was still straight, her handshake still firm, and her eyes still missed very little. The moment she saw me, she walked around the desk instead of waiting for me to approach. "Stephanie!" She hugged me. Not the quick, polite kind, the kind that says I believe you before you've said a word. That almost made me cry. Instead, I swallowed hard. "Thank you for seeing me." Karen studied my face for several seconds. "You haven't slept." "No. You look like you did after Richard's funeral." I managed a sad smile. "This feels worse." Karen didn't argue. She simply guided me into her office and closed the door. "Start from the beginning." I opened my canvas bag. One by one, I laid everything on her desk. My notebook, the retirement paperwork, my identification, Richard's letter, my phone. Karen didn't interrupt. She waited until I had arranged everything neatly before sitting down across from me. Then I told her everything. About Ethan's sudden interest in my finances, about Melissa's questions, about Lily's warning, about the missing check, about the phone call afterward. Finally, about the recording. Karen folded her hands. "Can I hear it?" I nodded. I played only the section after I had left Ethan's house. The room became completely silent. Neither of us moved while Ethan's voice filled the office. "By Monday it'll be handled." Mom's been slipping. People believe what they already expect to believe. Karen's expression never changed. That worried me more than if she had gasped. When the recording ended, she reached over and stopped the playback. Then she leaned back slowly. "I've worked in banking for almost 16 years, she said quietly. I've heard a lot of elder financial abuse cases." She paused. "This one is organized." The words landed heavily. Organized. Not impulsive, not emotional, planned. Karen continued. "They aren't just trying to steal one check. I know. They're creating a narrative." I nodded. "So no one believes me." "So everyone believes them." Silence settled between us. Finally, Karen opened her computer. "Let's see whether they've already tried." She typed quickly. My account appeared. Everything looked normal. Balance unchanged. No suspicious withdrawals. For a brief second, I wondered if maybe Ethan had been interrupted before depositing the check. Then Karen frowned. "What?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she clicked through another screen. Then another. "I need to verify something." My heart began pounding. Karen picked up the office phone. "Angela," a voice answered through the speaker. "I need image records from yesterday and Saturday for attempted pension deposits over $3,500. "Any specific customer?" Karen looked at me. "Unknown." She hung up. "We'll know in a minute." Those 60 seconds felt longer than the entire drive to the bank. Finally, Angela knocked gently before entering with a folder. Karen thanked her. then began opening electronic image records. The first one wasn't mine. Neither was the second. The third... Karen stopped scrolling. There. She enlarged the scanned check. My retirement check. My signature space was filled in. Only, it wasn't my signature. Whoever had signed my name had copied the letters carefully, but they hadn't copied me. When you've signed your name tens of thousands of times over 68 years, tiny habits become impossible to fake. The angle of the S, the curve of the W, the pressure on the final N. I didn't even need Karen to tell me. That's not mine. Karen nodded. I know. She zoomed further. Then another document appeared. Deposit slip. New account. Different branch. Opened 3 days earlier. Account holder, Melissa Wilson. My stomach dropped. Karen clicked another screen. I was afraid of that. What? They tried to deposit your retirement check into Melissa's personal account yesterday afternoon. Yesterday. Sunday. While Ethan was texting me, pretending to help look for it. When? Karen read the screen. 2:17 p.m. Yesterday at 2:17. At exactly that time, Ethan had sent me another message. Did you check between the car seats while he was texting me? His wife had been standing inside another branch, trying to cash my retirement check. I suddenly felt sick. Karen noticed immediately. Stephanie, I'm okay. No, you're not. She handed me a bottle of water. I drank slowly. Karen continued reading. The transaction was flagged. Why? The teller noticed something. What? Karen smiled for the first time. You. I looked confused. The teller recognized your name. My name. Karen nodded. You've banked with us for almost 40 years. Oh. She thought it was strange that someone other than you was depositing a pension check payable only to Stephanie Wilson. So she stopped it. Temporarily. Karen's face became serious again. Melissa claimed you had mobility problems and asked her to handle your banking. I stared at her. I've never... I know. Karen opened another note. When the teller asked for a notarized power of attorney, she looked directly at me. Melissa couldn't produce one. So they refused? They delayed the transaction. Then what? Melissa became angry. That sounded familiar. Karen continued reading. She insisted the bank was discriminating against family caregivers. I almost laughed. The cruelty of it was unbelievable. They had tried to steal from me, then accused the bank of discrimination when they couldn't. Karen clicked another attachment. Stephanie. What? I think you should see this. She turned the monitor toward me. Security camera image. There stood Melissa. Designer handbag over one shoulder, my retirement check in one hand, deposit slip in the other. She looked impatient, annoyed, not guilty, not nervous, simply irritated that the bank wasn't cooperating. Karen enlarged the image. The timestamp confirmed it. Sunday, 2:17 p.m. My chest tightened. I can't believe... Karen interrupted gently. Believe it. I looked away from the screen. I kept thinking maybe Ethan had pressured her. Karen didn't answer immediately. Then she said something I never forgot. Stephanie. Yes, people who are pressured don't usually forge signatures. The office fell silent again. She was right. Forgery required intention, planning, choice. Melissa had made hers. Karen printed the image, then another, then the deposit attempt, then the signature comparison. She placed everything neatly into a folder. Keep these. What do I do now? We protect you. She opened another banking screen. I'm freezing mobile deposit access connected to this check. Can you do that? I already have. What else? We're opening a brand new checking account. I've had this account for almost 40 years. I know. I don't want to lose it. Karen leaned forward. Stephanie, they know your account number. They've probably seen your routing information. They know where your pension comes. We start fresh. I sighed. Okay. For the next 40 minutes, we changed everything. New account, new debit card, new online banking credentials, new security questions. Karen insisted on two-factor authentication. She added verbal verification notes requiring my direct confirmation for unusual transactions. Then she suggested something unexpected. I'd also recommend putting a verbal password on your customer profile. A password, if anyone calls pretending to act on your behalf, we'll ask for it. I nodded immediately. What should it be? Karen smiled softly. You choose. I thought for several seconds, then I answered. Richard. She typed it without another word. When the paperwork was finished, Karen leaned back. We've protected the account. But that's only half the problem. I know. The other half is your son." Neither of us spoke for several moments. Finally, Karen asked quietly, "What are you planning?" I looked at Richard's letter inside my folder, then at my notebook, then at the phone containing the recording. "I don't know yet." Karen studied me. "I think you do." Maybe she was right, because somewhere during that morning, between seeing Melissa's face on the security camera and hearing my son's voice again, something had become very clear. I wasn't fighting over a retirement check anymore. I was fighting for my own credibility. If Ethan convinced enough people that I was confused, he wouldn't need to steal another check. He could eventually control every dollar I owned, every decision I made, even my house. Karen suddenly spoke again. "Stephanie?" "Yes. There's one more thing." She reached into another drawer. "This came through internal messaging this morning." She handed me a printed fraud alert. At the top was my name. Below it, the words made my blood run cold. "Customer may be subject to potential elder financial exploitation. Monitor unusual activity." Karen looked at me carefully. "I filed that alert." I blinked. "You did?" "The moment I heard your recording." "What does it do?" "It tells every branch to contact me personally before processing unusual transactions involving your accounts." Tears filled my eyes, not from sadness, from relief, for the first time since Saturday night. Someone wasn't asking whether I was imagining things. Someone was helping me. Karen reached across the desk and gently squeezed my hand. "You've spent your whole life taking care of other people. It's our turn now." I couldn't speak. She smiled. "But Stephanie..." "What?" "If Ethan really believes you're becoming mentally incompetent..." She paused carefully. "This retirement check probably isn't his endgame." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" Karen looked toward Richard's folder. "I think he's after something much bigger." The room suddenly felt colder. Because deep inside, I already knew exactly what she meant. My house. I drove home with Karen's folder resting on the passenger seat like it contained something fragile. In a way it did. It contained proof. Not enough to end everything, but enough to prove to myself that I had not imagined any of it. The security photographs, the forged signature, the deposit slip, the fraud alert. For the first time since Richard died, I felt as though someone else was standing beside me instead of leaving me to fight alone. Yet the drive home did not bring peace. It brought questions. Karen had been right. The retirement check was never the real prize. Nearly $4,000 would help someone struggling with debt, but it was temporary. Ethan was thinking further ahead than that. The way he had talked about my house, my accounts, my paperwork, it all fit together now. He wasn't stealing money. He was trying to take control of my entire life. When I pulled into my driveway, another car was already parked in front of my house. A black pickup. Ethan's. My stomach tightened. He was sitting on my front porch, elbows resting on his knees, staring down at his phone. The moment he heard my engine, he stood and forced a smile. "There you are." I stayed beside my car instead of walking toward him. "What are you doing here?" "I've been worried." The words almost sounded convincing. Almost. "I called." "I know." "You didn't answer." "I was busy." He looked toward the canvas folder in my hands. "Where have you been?" "Out." His eyes narrowed just enough for me to notice. "Everything okay?" I could ask you the same thing. For a split second, I thought I saw panic. Then it disappeared beneath another practiced smile. "I just wanted to help you look for the check." "I already looked. And I didn't find it." "Technically true." He nodded sympathetically. "I'm sorry, Mom." He actually reached out and touched my shoulder. 3 days earlier, that gesture would have comforted me. Now it made my skin crawl. "I called the issuing office," I said casually. His hand froze. "Oh." "They said the check hasn't cleared." His face remained surprisingly calm. "Well, that's good news." "Yes. We'll figure it out." We. Always we. I unlocked the front door. "You can come in for a few minutes." He smiled. "I'd like that." Inside, he looked around as though checking whether anything had changed. His eyes paused on the canvas folder again. "Doing paperwork." "A little." "What kind?" "Just organizing." He laughed lightly. "You've always been organized." That was true. He knew it was true, which made his attempt to paint me as forgetful even crueler. I walked into the kitchen. "Coffee?" "Sure." While I filled the kettle, I watched his reflection in the microwave door. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking around the room. The filing cabinet wasn't downstairs. The family photographs, Richard's desk through the hallway. Every glance lasted only a second. But together, they told a story. He was searching. How's Melissa? I asked. Fine. And Lily? His shoulders stiffened almost imperceptibly. She's okay. She seemed upset Saturday. He shrugged. Teenagers. I turned around. No. What? She was scared. His expression hardened. You've always imagined things where Lily's concerned. Imagined. There was that word again. I set 2 coffee mugs on the table. No, Ethan. I've raised children. I know what scared looks like. He avoided my eyes. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, he cleared his throat. So, did you ever think maybe the check blew away somewhere? I looked at him. My retirement check. Maybe when you got out of the car. It was inside my purse. Maybe the zipper wasn't closed. Ethan, what? I checked before I left your house. He sighed dramatically. I don't know why we're going in circles. Neither did I, because he already knew exactly where the check had gone. He took a sip of coffee, then he changed subjects. Mom, yes, I've been thinking. Dangerous habit. He smiled weakly. You've been alone a long time. I have. Sometimes I worry. I waited. He leaned forward. I think you're trying to handle too much by yourself. I said nothing. You've got the house, the bills, the retirement, insurance, medical appointments. It can overwhelm anybody. There it was, the script. I could almost hear Melissa feeding him lines. I'm managing. I know you think that. Think, not know. Think. But sometimes we don't notice when we're struggling. I folded my hands quietly. What are you suggesting? He hesitated just long enough to make it seem reluctant. I've been reading about financial power of attorney. There it was. Right on schedule. So, it would only be for emergencies. I don't have one. You should. I already do. His eyebrows lifted. You do? Yes. I didn't know that. No, you didn't. Technically, I hadn't lied. Richard and I had already arranged certain legal protections years ago. They simply weren't the kind Ethan imagined. He tried another approach. Well, maybe we should update it. You know what I mean. I do. And the answer is no. Silence. He took another sip of coffee. You don't trust me. The words sounded almost wounded. I met his eyes. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He set the mug down harder than necessary. I've done everything I can to help you. Everything. Interesting choice of words. You've asked a lot of questions. I care. You've asked about my bank, my retirement, my insurance, my house, my will, my beneficiaries. His expression changed, only slightly, but enough. I was planning. For my future? For ours. Ours? He rubbed his forehead. Mom, I have a family. So do I. The room became quiet again. Finally, he stood. I hate fighting. So do I. He walked toward the hallway. I should probably head home. As he reached the front door, he paused beside the wall of family photographs. His fingers touched one frame, a picture of Richard holding 6-year-old Ethan on his shoulders at the county fair. I miss Dad. The words were so unexpected they almost broke me. I miss him too. He always knew what to do. Usually. Ethan nodded slowly. He trusted me. I felt something cold settle in my chest. No. He turned. What? He loved you. That's different. His eyes searched mine. What do you mean? I almost told him. I almost pulled Richard's letter from the folder. I almost asked him whether he knew his father had worried enough to leave warnings behind. Instead, I simply said, Your father loved you very much. Then I opened the front door. He stood there another second. Then he hugged me. Not warmly. Not like a son. It felt performed. When he left, I watched his truck disappear around the corner. Only after he was gone did I realize something. The coffee mug he had used was still half full. He had barely touched it. He hadn't come for coffee. He hadn't come to comfort me. He had come to see what I knew. At 3 that afternoon, my phone rang again. Rachel Turner. My daughter. Technically my stepdaughter. Richard's daughter from his first marriage, but after 40 years, I had stopped thinking of step. Rachel lived in Cincinnati and worked as a middle school principal. Unlike Ethan, she called because she wanted to hear my voice. Hi, Mom. That single word always warmed me. Hi, sweetheart. You sound tired. I am. Everything okay? I hesitated. Then I asked, Has Ethan talked to you? Silence. A long silence. Finally, Rachel answered carefully. He called yesterday. What did he say? He said you were having memory problems. I closed my eyes. So it starts. What? He told you I'm confused. He said you've been forgetting things. He seemed worried. I laughed quietly, not because it was funny, because Karen had been exactly right. They've already started. Mom, I need you to answer honestly. Of course. If I told you Ethan stole my retirement check, Rachel interrupted immediately, I'd believe you. The words hit me harder than I expected. You would. I've known my brother longer than anyone. I sat down. Rachel, there's more, isn't there? I looked toward the folder Karen had given me. Much more. Rachel's voice became firm. I'm driving to Columbus. You don't have to. I do. I'll leave after work. I'll be there tonight. I felt tears threaten again. Not because I was weak, because someone believed me before asking for proof. Before hanging up, Rachel added quietly, Mom, yes. Don't sign anything. The words stopped me cold. Why would you say that? Another pause. Then she answered, because Ethan asked me last week whether you'd ever considered giving him control of your finances. The room went silent. He asked you? Yes. I thought it was strange. I told him it wasn't my business. My heart was pounding now. When was this? Last Thursday. Before the dinner. Before the stolen check. Before everything. No, not before everything. This had been everything. The dinner wasn't the beginning. It was simply the first move I had noticed. After hanging up, I walked upstairs to Richard's office again. This time, I opened every drawer, every folder, every envelope. If Ethan had been searching for something, I intended to find it first. Nearly an hour later, hidden behind old tax files, I found a large manila envelope. On the front, in Richard's unmistakable handwriting, were 5 words. Open only if necessary. I stared at it for a very long time. Then I slowly reached for it. For several long seconds, I simply stared at the envelope. Open only if necessary. Richard's handwriting was as familiar to me as my own. Even after 3 years, I could recognize the slight slant of every letter, the careful spacing between words, the tiny loop he always made in capital O's. I rested my fingertips on the envelope. Please tell me you already knew how this would end, I whispered. Of course there was no answer. There never is. I carried the envelope downstairs to the dining room table, instead of opening it in Richard's office. Somehow it felt wrong to break the seal where he had written it. The dining room was where we had celebrated birthdays, graduations, Christmas mornings, and ordinary Tuesday dinners. It was where decisions had always been made together. Now I would make one alone. I carefully slid a letter opener beneath the flap. Inside were several documents, a typed letter, copies of legal papers, a small flash drive, and a business card. David Harper, attorney at law. My heart skipped, the same attorney whose name Karen had recognized when I mentioned Richard's estate. I unfolded Richard's letter first. Steph, if you're reading this, something has happened that made you question whether someone you love can still be trusted. I hope I'm wrong. I pray I'm wrong. But if I'm not, I want you to know you are stronger than you think. Over the last several years, I noticed changes in Ethan that worried me. Not because he stopped loving us completely, but because money started changing the way he thought. Every problem seemed to have the same solution, someone else's sacrifice. I never wanted to believe our son could intentionally hurt you. But I also promised myself that if I wasn't here someday, you would never have to fight alone. Please call David before making any decisions. He knows everything I've arranged. Most importantly, trust your instincts. You have spent a lifetime protecting other people. It's time to protect yourself. Love always. Richard. By the time I reached the bottom of the page, I could barely see the words through my tears. Not because Richard had been suspicious, because he had been trying to protect me even after he was gone. I placed the letter gently beside me and picked up the legal documents. The first few pages were copies of our wills. Nothing surprising. Then I reached another document. Its title immediately caught my attention. Supplemental Asset Protection Clause. I frowned. I didn't remember signing anything by that name. As I read further, I realized why. Richard had added it during the final update of our estate plan shortly after his cancer diagnosis. It wasn't complicated. It simply stated that if any beneficiary intentionally committed fraud, forgery, financial exploitation, coercion, or elder abuse against either of us, that person would automatically lose all inheritance rights under the estate. I read the paragraph 3 times. Richard had even handwritten a note in the margin. Love should never be rewarded with betrayal. I covered my mouth. He had actually prepared for this possibility, not because he expected Ethan to become this man, But because he wanted to make sure I would never have to choose between protecting myself and honoring his memory. The flash drive was labeled simply Evidence Instructions. I had no idea what that meant. I plugged it into my laptop. Inside were scanned copies of important legal records, property deeds, insurance documents, investment summaries. Everything was neatly organized. Richard, always organized. Then I noticed one more folder. Its title was Unexpected. Conversations. Curious, I opened it. There were several audio files, not many, only 4. Each had a date from nearly 2 years before Richard died. I clicked the first one. Richard's voice filled the room. Testing. Stephanie keeps saying I should learn how to use this recorder. I smiled despite everything. He sounded healthy, strong. The first recording was nothing important, just Richard practicing with a digital recorder while teasing me. The second, also ordinary. House maintenance reminders, insurance renewal notes. Then I opened the third. Immediately I heard another voice. Ethan. My entire body froze. Dad, you're overreacting. Richard answered calmly. I'm trying to understand why you need another $15,000. I told you. No, Ethan. You gave me excuses. Silence. Then Ethan sighed. You've got plenty. Richard's voice became firmer. That's not the point. You and Mom are comfortable. We earned that comfort. I'll pay it back. You said that last time. I sat motionless. I had never known this conversation happened. Apparently, Richard hadn't wanted to burden me while he was sick. The recording continued. Ethan, listen carefully. I'm listening. If you're in financial trouble, we'll help you figure it out. But I won't keep writing checks every time you make another bad decision. Then came several seconds of silence. Finally, Ethan spoke again. You don't trust me. Richard answered quietly, I want to. Those 4 words broke my heart, not because of Ethan, because I knew exactly how Richard must have felt saying them. The recording ended. I couldn't bring myself to open the 4th file, not yet. Instead, I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. For years, Richard had quietly carried worries he never shared with me, not to hide them, to protect me. The realization hurt almost as much as Ethan's betrayal. At exactly 6:15 that evening, Rachel arrived. The moment she stepped inside, she wrapped me in a hug so tight I almost collapsed. She looked exhausted from the drive, still wearing her navy blazer from work. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, and she carried a laptop bag over one shoulder. You shouldn't have driven this far after work. I wasn't staying away. She studied my face. You've lost weight. It's only been 2 days. Stress can do that. I nodded toward the dining room. I found something. Within 15 minutes, Rachel had read Richard's letter, then the legal clause. Then she listened to part of Ethan's recording. When it finished, she removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. I knew he was struggling financially. You did. He borrowed money from me last year. How much? $8,000. I stared at her. He told me it was for a business investment. Did he repay you? Rachel gave a sad smile. What do you think? No. No. She looked down at Richard's letter again. I never told Dad. Why not? I didn't want him worrying during chemo. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then Rachel said quietly, I think Ethan owes more people than we realize. That thought had crossed my mind too. The pressure in his voice during that phone call outside my house, the desperation, the constant urgency. None of it fit a man who was only behind on a few bills. Rachel opened her laptop. I did something before coming. What? I searched public court records. My heart skipped. And she turned the screen toward me. Several civil filings, contract disputes, unpaid supplier claims, one judgment, another pending lawsuit. My eyes widened. I had no idea. He kept it quiet. There are almost, Rachel nodded, over $100,000 in claims. I leaned back in disbelief. No wonder he wanted my retirement. No wonder he wanted the house. No wonder every conversation suddenly revolved around money. Rachel scrolled farther, then stopped. Mom. What? This is newer. Filed. 3 weeks earlier. Petition draft. Not officially submitted. Applicant, Ethan Wilson. Subject petition for conservatorship evaluation. I stared at the screen. What is that? Rachel looked sick. It means... She swallowed. It means he was already gathering paperwork to argue that you couldn't manage your own financial affairs? The room became silent. Not because I was surprised, because seeing it in writing made everything real. He planned this before dinner. Rachel nodded slowly. The dinner wasn't spontaneous. It was part of the plan. Exactly. The missing check, the accusations about my memory, the phone call, the forged signature, the conversations about my age, every piece fit together. He wasn't reacting to opportunity. He had created the opportunity. Rachel reached across the table and took my hand. "We're stopping this." I nodded. "Yes, we're stopping all of it." At that exact moment, my phone buzzed. A text from Lily. My heart jumped. I opened it immediately. "Grandma, are you alone?" I replied. "No, Aunt Rachel is here." 3 dots appeared almost instantly, then another message. "Good. I need to tell you something. Dad doesn't know I'm texting you." Rachel looked at me. "What is it?" I handed her the phone. Another message appeared. "I found papers in Dad's office. I took pictures before he came home." Then another. "They're about you." My pulse quickened. Seconds later. 3 photographs arrived. The first showed legal forms. The second, bank account information. The third made my blood run cold. Across the top of the page in bold letters were the words Medical Capacity Evaluation Request. Below it, my name. Stephanie Wilson. Rachel looked at me in horror. "He wasn't waiting until you seemed confused," she whispered. "He was preparing to convince everyone that you already were." I stared at Lily's messages. That sweet 17-year-old girl had quietly risked everything to protect me. I typed carefully. "Thank you, sweetheart. Delete our conversation after this. Don't let your parents know you sent these." Several seconds passed, then her reply came. "I will, Grandma. I'm scared." My eyes filled with tears. I answered immediately. "You are not alone anymore, I promise." I set the phone down. Rachel looked toward Richard's folder, then back at me. "I think it's time." "For what?" "To call David Harper." I nodded slowly. Because after everything Lily had just sent, this wasn't simply about proving Ethan had stolen my retirement check anymore. It was about stopping him before he succeeded in stealing something far more valuable. My entire life. I barely slept that night. Not because I was afraid anymore. Fear had changed into something quieter. Determination. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation from the past 2 months. Every unexpected phone call. Every question about my finances. Every compliment that had felt slightly rehearsed. Every visit that suddenly made sense. The pattern was impossible to ignore now. Ethan hadn't suddenly become interested in me. He had become interested in what I owned. Around 5:30 the next morning, I gave up on sleep, made a pot of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with Richard's folder, Karen's folder, my notebook, and Lily's photographs spread out before me. Rachel came downstairs about half an hour later. "You've been up for a while." "I never really went to bed." She looked at the paperwork covering the table. "You've organized everything." "I was a nurse." She smiled sadly. "You were. I learned long ago that doctors make better decisions when nurses hand them complete charts." Rachel poured herself coffee. "So now you're building a chart." "For the truth." She sat beside me and quietly reviewed everything one more time. The timeline, Saturday dinner, the missing check, Sunday deposit attempt, the recording, the forged signature, Lily's photographs, the conservatorship paperwork, Richard's letters, Karen's security images. Everything fit together almost too perfectly. Then Rachel looked at one photograph longer than the others. "Wait. What?" She enlarged one of Lily's pictures on her phone. "There." She pointed to a handwritten note attached to the conservatorship paperwork. Most of it was blurry, but one sentence was perfectly readable. "Obtain physician statement before filing." Rachel looked up. "They don't have a doctor's opinion yet." "No. They're planning to get one." "But how?" I remembered Melissa's words. "Maybe you should talk to your doctor." A cold realization settled over me. "They were testing me." Rachel frowned. "Testing every conversation. The questions. The pressure. They wanted me to get upset. So I'd look unstable." Rachel slowly nodded. "If you exploded, they'd call it evidence. If you cried, they'd call it confusion. If you accused them, they'd call it paranoia." For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then Rachel quietly said, "They underestimated you." "No." I looked at Richard's photograph on the shelf. "They underestimated your father." At exactly 9 o'clock, I dialed the number on David Harper's business card. The receptionist answered immediately. "Harper Legal Group. My name is Stephanie Wilson." There was a brief pause. "Oh." Her voice softened. "Mrs. Wilson?" "Mr. Harper asked that if you ever called, we should put you through immediately." I exchanged a surprised glance with Rachel. Within seconds, another voice came on the line. "Stephanie?" David Harper sounded older than I expected, but calm. "It's been too long. I'm sorry to call under these circumstances. Richard prepared me for the possibility." Those words sent a chill through me. "You knew." "I knew he was worried. He never wanted to burden you." I closed my eyes. "Can you come in today?" "Yes." "Bring every document. The recordings. The photographs. Everything. We'll go through it together." David's office was in downtown Columbus inside a brick building that had probably stood for nearly a century. The walls were lined with bookshelves, old legal volumes, family photographs, awards, nothing flashy. Everything felt steady. David himself stood when we entered. He looked to be in his early 70s, wearing a charcoal suit and wire-rimmed glasses. The first thing he did surprised me. He hugged me. Not dramatically, simply like an old family friend. "I'm sorry." "So am I." He motioned toward a conference table. "Let's begin." For almost 2 hours, we reviewed every piece of evidence. David rarely interrupted. Instead, he took careful notes, occasionally asking only small questions. What time exactly? Who else was present? Did anyone besides Lily witness this? When we reached the recording, he asked me to stop it halfway through. "I've heard enough. You don't want the rest." "I do. But legally?" He folded his hands. "The first admission already establishes intent." Rachel looked surprised. "It does?" David nodded. "They discuss your missing check. They discuss creating a false narrative regarding Stephanie's mental condition. They discuss using that narrative if she reports the theft." He looked directly at me. "That is extraordinarily significant." I felt my shoulders loosen slightly. For days I had questioned myself, wondered whether I was exaggerating, whether grief had somehow made everything seem worse than it really was. David erased that doubt in one sentence. "This isn't a misunderstanding." He said it firmly. "This is a coordinated attempt at financial exploitation." Then he asked something unexpected. "Stephanie?" "Yes." "Has Ethan ever borrowed substantial amounts of money from you?" "Several times." "Documented?" "Some." "Forgiven?" "Most." He sighed quietly. "That's unfortunate." Rachel spoke. "He borrowed $8,000 from me." David wrote that down. "Repaid?" "No." David wasn't surprised. Instead, he asked, "Anyone else?" Neither of us knew. At least, not then. David stood and walked to a cabinet. He removed another folder. "This belongs to you." The label read, "Wilson Estate Planning." He opened it carefully. Inside was the original estate plan Richard had prepared, along with handwritten notes. David adjusted his glasses. "Richard updated your estate about 18 months before he passed. I remember signing papers. There was one discussion you weren't present for." I looked confused. "What discussion?" "Ethan requested a meeting." Rachel frowned. "When—" David checked his notes. "About 2 years before Richard died." "What happened?" David hesitated. "I normally wouldn't disclose private meetings. But Richard specifically instructed me that if circumstances like these ever arose," he looked directly at me, "I was to tell you everything." The room became completely silent. David continued. "Ethan asked whether your estate could be simplified." "Simplified?" He wanted to know whether assets could automatically transfer to him if Richard passed away first. I stared at him. "What did Richard say?" "He said absolutely not." Rachel slowly leaned back in her chair. David continued. "Then Ethan asked another question." My heart pounded. "He wanted to know what would happen if you became mentally incompetent." I couldn't breathe. David looked genuinely saddened. "Richard ended the meeting immediately." "He called me afterward. He was shaken." I felt tears welling again. Richard had carried this alone, even while fighting cancer. "He told me something I'll never forget." David opened his notes. He said, David smiled sadly, "If my son ever starts seeing Stephanie as an account balance instead of his mother, promise me you'll protect her." I covered my face. Rachel reached over and held my hand. David waited quietly until I regained my composure. When we finally resumed, David slid one document across the table. "I think it's time you understood something else." "What?" "The Supplemental Asset Protection Clause." "I've read it." "Not completely." He pointed to the final section. I hadn't noticed it before. "If a beneficiary intentionally commits financial exploitation against Stephanie Wilson," I continued reading, "said beneficiary shall immediately forfeit all inheritance rights under this estate." David nodded. "Yes." "But there's more." I read the final paragraph. Such forfeited shares shall be redistributed according to the discretion granted within Schedule B. I looked up. Schedule B. David opened another folder. There it was. Schedule B. I scanned the page, then stopped. My eyes widened. Richard had already written exactly where Ethan's inheritance would go if he ever lost it. 20% to Rachel, 30% to a charitable healthcare foundation, 50% held in trust. Beneficiary Lily Wilson. I stared at the page. Lily. David smiled softly. Richard adored her. He believed she had his heart. Rachel laughed quietly through tears. He always said she reminded him of Mom. David nodded. He also wrote another note. He handed it to me. Richard's handwriting again. If Lily grows into the honest young woman I believe she'll become, she'll understand that money should protect people, not divide them. I couldn't stop crying. Even now, Richard was still teaching us, still protecting us, still seeing goodness where others had chosen greed. After lunch, David became more serious. Stephanie. Yes, we need to discuss timing. What do you mean? Ethan has already begun preparing conservatorship documents. We know. He hasn't filed yet. So we still have time. David nodded, but not much. What should we do? He leaned forward. I don't want to react. I want to control the next move. Rachel looked interested. How? David smiled slightly. We let Ethan believe his plan is still working. I frowned. You mean, don't confront him. Don't accuse him. Don't mention the recording. Don't mention Karen. Don't mention me. I understood immediately. If he thinks I know, he'll destroy evidence. Exactly. David stood and walked toward the window. I suspect he'll contact you again. He'll probably push harder. For signatures. For meetings. For doctor's appointments. I nodded slowly. What do I do? David turned back toward me. You cooperate. Rachel looked shocked. What? David smiled. Not completely. Just enough. Enough to make him believe Stephanie still trusts him. I wasn't sure I liked that idea. David noticed. I know. It's difficult. But sometimes, he looked directly at me. The safest place to catch a thief is while he's still convinced no one is watching. I thought about the recording, about the forged check, about Lily risking everything to send photographs, about Richard preparing for this years before his death. Then I slowly nodded. Okay. David smiled. Good. Because I believe Ethan is about to make an even bigger mistake. As if the universe had been listening, my phone vibrated. A text message from Ethan. Mom, Melissa, and I were thinking maybe we should all have dinner again Friday. There are some important family decisions we should discuss. David looked at the screen, then at me. There it is. What? The next move. I stared at the message. Important family decisions. I already knew exactly what those decisions were going to be. They were finally going to ask me to sign something. And this time, I was going to let them believe they had a chance. I stared at Ethan's text for nearly a minute before looking up at David Harper. Should I answer now? David leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. Yes. What do I say? The truth. I looked confused. The truth? He smiled. Just not all of it. Rachel laughed softly. I like him. David smiled back. You don't have to lie to someone who's already lying to himself. He slid a yellow legal pad across the conference table. Keep your response short. No emotion. No accusations. No questions. Simply accept. I looked back at my phone, then I typed. Friday works. Just let me know what time. Nothing more, nothing less. Within 30 seconds, Ethan replied, Great. Love you, Mom. 3 simple words. A week earlier, they would have warmed my heart. Now they felt like part of a negotiation. I slipped my phone into my purse. David noticed. How do you feel? I thought about the question carefully. I wish he meant it. David nodded. So do I. Before Rachel and I left, David gave us both copies of every document. He also handed me a business card with a handwritten number on the back. My personal cell. I hope I won't need it. You probably will. His honesty was strangely comforting. As we stood to leave, David said one final thing. Stephanie. Yes, if Ethan presents legal paperwork. Don't refuse immediately. Rachel frowned. Why not? David answered without hesitation. Because people reveal the most about themselves when they think they're winning. The drive home felt different from every other drive that week. For the first time, I had a plan. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. Rachel stayed until late afternoon helping me organize every document into separate folders. One folder for bank records, one for the recordings, one for Lily's photographs, one for Richard's estate papers, another for written notes. By the time we finished, my dining room table looked like a small law office. Rachel smiled. Dad would approve. I hope so. He definitely would. Before leaving, she hugged me tightly. You call me immediately if Ethan comes over. I will. No matter what time. I promise. After she drove away, the house became quiet again. Not lonely. Just quiet. There is a difference. Loneliness is wishing someone were there. Peace is realizing you're finally safe enough to hear yourself think. I made soup for dinner, though I wasn't very hungry. While it heated on the stove, I found myself looking through old family photo albums. There was Ethan at age 4 sitting on Richard's shoulders at the zoo. Ethan catching his first baseball. Ethan grinning with chocolate cake all over his face on his 10th birthday. Then graduation. Wedding. Lily's birth. I traced one photograph with my finger. Richard stood beside Ethan, both of them laughing about something outside the frame. What happened? I whispered. When did we lose you? There was no answer, only silence. Thursday morning passed quietly, almost too quietly. Around 11 o'clock, my doorbell rang. Through the front window, I saw Melissa, alone. I hadn't expected that. For one brief moment, I considered pretending not to be home. Instead, I opened the door. Melissa? Stephanie. She was carrying a white bakery box. I brought cinnamon rolls. How thoughtful. How calculated. You didn't have to. I wanted to. She smiled warmly. I thought we could talk. I stepped aside. Come in. She walked directly into the kitchen, setting the bakery box on the counter as though she belonged there. I know things have been awkward. A little. Ethan feels terrible. Interesting. Not guilty. Terrible. She opened the box. I know you've always loved these. She remembered. That almost hurt more than if she hadn't. She knew exactly what I liked. Exactly how to appear caring. She poured 2 cups of coffee before I even offered. Then she sat across from me. For several minutes, we discussed harmless things. The weather, Lily's college applications, her garden, normal conversation, until she finally sighed dramatically. Stephanie. Yes. I think Ethan and I made a mistake. My heart skipped. Was she about to confess we've probably been too protective? Protective. Not dishonest, not manipulative, protective. I waited. When Richard passed away, she reached across the table. We just worried about you. I looked at her hand, then back at her face. I'm managing. I know. But sometimes people don't realize when they need help. Again, the same script, different voice. She took a careful breath. That's actually why Ethan wanted dinner tomorrow. I thought it was just family time. It is. She smiled gently. But we also wanted to discuss planning. Planning, you know. She hesitated just enough to appear reluctant. Financial planning? There it was. I remained completely still. What kind of planning? Melissa lowered her voice. We've spoken with someone. I already knew, but I asked anyway. Who? A financial advisor. Interesting. Not a lawyer, not yet, or perhaps that was simply easier to admit. He suggested putting someone you trust on your accounts. I nodded thoughtfully. I see. She seemed encouraged. And, she continued carefully, having someone help with important decisions if your health ever changed. Health, not competence. She was choosing softer words. I looked out the kitchen window for a moment before answering. I'll think about it. Melissa blinked. You will. I said I'll think about it. For the first time since she arrived, genuine surprise crossed her face. She had expected resistance. Instead, she received possibility. Exactly as David predicted. Oh, she smiled broadly. I think that's wonderful. I almost pitied her. Almost. Because she had no idea why I agreed. She stayed another 20 minutes. Before leaving, she hugged me. The embrace felt empty, like hugging a department store mannequin. At the front door, she turned back. Oh, I almost forgot. She reached into her purse. These are the papers the advisor prepared. There they were. A thin blue folder. Exactly what David expected. I don't have to sign anything tomorrow, she said quickly. Just read them tonight. I accepted the folder. I'll do that. She smiled brightly. I knew you'd understand. After she drove away, I didn't even open the folder. Instead, I called David. They brought papers. As expected. I'm bringing them over. Good. An hour later, I was back in David's office. He reviewed the documents one page at a time, occasionally shaking his head. Finally, he removed his glasses. Well, how bad? Worse than I expected. My stomach tightened. What is it? This isn't a simple financial power of attorney. It isn't. David turned the first page toward me. Read the title. I did. Durable General Financial Power of Attorney. So, he pointed farther down. Read the authority section. As I read, my hands began trembling. Authority to access bank accounts. Authority to sell real estate. Authority to transfer assets. Authority to manage investments. Authority to borrow against property. Authority to conduct legal actions. Authority to close accounts. Authority to establish trusts. I looked up. This gives Ethan, David finished the sentence, almost complete financial control. I couldn't believe what I was reading. What about me? You would technically remain the owner. But practically, he sighed, he could control nearly everything. I turned another page, then another. Near the end, one paragraph caught my attention, effective immediately upon execution. I looked at David. Immediately. He nodded. Not after incapacity. Immediately. So if I signed this tomorrow, he could legally begin acting on your behalf tomorrow afternoon. A chill ran through me. Karen had been right. The retirement check wasn't the goal. It was simply the beginning. David continued reading, then suddenly stopped. What? He looked closer, then handed me the page. There. Near the bottom, a small attached note, handwritten, apparently forgotten inside the folder. Melissa's handwriting. Remember to distract her before signature page. Keep conversation emotional. Mention Dad. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then David quietly said, they weren't just planning legal documents. They were planning emotional manipulation. I closed my eyes. Mention Dad. Use Richard even now, even after everything. They were willing to use my husband's memory to lower my guard. That hurt more than anything else. David carefully placed the note into a plastic evidence sleeve. This stays with me. I nodded. He looked directly at me. Stephanie? Yes. Tomorrow's dinner just became much more important. I know. They're going to believe they're one signature away from winning. I looked at the power of attorney one last time, then slowly closed the folder. No, I said quietly. They're one signature away from losing everything. David smiled for the first time that afternoon. I was hoping you'd say that. As I stood to leave, my phone vibrated again. A message from Lily. Grandma, please be careful tomorrow. Dad keeps saying everything will be over after Friday night. I read it twice. Then looked up at David. He didn't need to ask. He already knew. Tomorrow night, Ethan wasn't planning another family dinner. He was planning the final step in taking my life away from me. He just didn't realize someone else had already changed the ending. Friday morning arrived colder than the rest of the week. A thin layer of frost covered the grass outside my bedroom window, and for a moment, everything looked peaceful. It was the kind of quiet autumn morning Richard loved. He would have been outside already, coffee mug in one hand, checking the bird feeder with the patience of a man who never believed life should be rushed. I stood at the window longer than usual. Wish me luck, I whispered. Then I smiled sadly. No, I don't need luck today. I need courage. By 8 o'clock, I was sitting across from David Harper again. He wanted one final meeting before dinner. Rachel had driven back to Columbus early that morning. Karen Brooks joined us during her lunch break. Seeing all three of them sitting around the conference table made me realize something. For days, I had been thinking this story was about betrayal. But it wasn't only about betrayal. It was also about those people who quietly step forward when betrayal leaves you standing alone. David spread several folders across the table. Tonight is simple. It won't feel simple. But legally, he tapped the first folder. Our objectives are very clear. He wrote 4 numbered points on a legal pad. 1. Allow Ethan to present the documents. 2. Let him explain everything in his own words. 3. Do not accuse him. 4. Let him keep talking. Karen smiled. People who think they've already won usually say much more than they should. Rachel laughed quietly. My brother definitely does. David looked at me. Stephanie. Yes. Can you stay calm? I answered honestly. I don't know. He nodded. That's a fair answer. I'll try. That's all I need. Karen opened a small case she had brought. Inside was something that looked like an ordinary fountain pen. She handed it to me. What is this? A voice recorder? I looked surprised. My phone already records? I know. but phones can be interrupted. Calls, notifications, battery. She smiled. This records continuously. I turned it over in my hand. It felt surprisingly heavy. How long? Almost 10 hours. And the sound quality? Karen grinned. Better than your phone. David nodded approvingly. Wear it in your cardigan pocket. No one will notice. I looked down at the pen. Saturday's recording had happened almost by accident. Tonight, everything would be intentional. Rachel handed me another envelope. I almost forgot. What is it? She smiled gently. Dad. Inside was one photograph, Richard and me, taken on our 40th wedding anniversary. He was laughing. I was looking at him instead of the camera. Rachel pointed to it. If tonight gets difficult, remember who you're protecting. Not the money, not the house, not even myself. Richard's wishes, our life's work, everything we built together. I slipped the picture into my purse. Before leaving the office, David asked one final question. If Ethan asks whether you've spoken to anyone, what do I say? The truth. Again, the truth. He smiled. Say you've had time to think. Nothing more, nothing less. I arrived at Ethan's house just before 6. The same driveway, the same porch, the same carefully trimmed bushes. Everything looked exactly as it had 1 week earlier, only I was different. This time, before getting out of the car, I clipped Karen's recording pen inside my cardigan pocket. Then I started it. A tiny green light flashed once. Recording. I also placed my phone in silent mode. 2 recorders, 1 backup. David believed in preparation. Richard had believed in preparation. Now, so did I. Ethan opened the front door before I knocked. Mom, he smiled broadly. You look nice. So do you. He hugged me. Again, it felt practiced. Melissa appeared behind him. We're so glad you came. I said I would. The dining room looked different this time. No candles, no elaborate meal, just lasagna, salad, and bread. Business dinner? Not family dinner. Lily was already sitting quietly at the table. The moment our eyes met, she gave the smallest possible nod. Barely noticeable. But enough. She knew. Or at least, she knew something important was happening. Dinner began awkwardly. No one talked much. Melissa kept trying to fill the silence. How's your garden? Good. Any plans for Thanksgiving? Not yet. Rachel coming this year? I hope so. Every conversation died after 2 or 3 sentences. Even Ethan seemed distracted. He barely touched his food. Instead, he kept glancing toward a leather portfolio resting beside his chair. The paperwork. Finally. Halfway through dinner. He cleared his throat. Mom, here it comes. Yes. I've been thinking a lot. I imagine you have. I owe you an apology. Interesting. Melissa looked at him with encouraging eyes. He continued. I think we've pushed too hard. I remained silent. I know losing Dad changed everything. It did. And I know you've been trying to handle everything yourself. I have. He leaned forward. But you shouldn't have to. There it was again. Need, dependence, rescue. The language of control wrapped in concern. He reached for the leather portfolio. I asked someone to prepare a few documents, Melissa quickly added. Just options. No pressure. I almost smiled, exactly as David predicted. Ethan opened the folder. These would simply make life easier. For everyone. Everyone. Not me. Everyone. He slid the papers across the table. I don't expect you to understand all the legal language. Melissa immediately interrupted. That's why we're here. To help. Of course. I slowly opened the folder, pretending to read. Though I already knew every page, every paragraph, every trap. I deliberately spent nearly 2 minutes turning pages, making them wait. People become impatient when they believe success is within reach. Finally, Ethan asked, What do you think? I looked up. It seems complicated. Melissa smiled warmly. It really isn't. I could explain. I'd rather Ethan explain. She looked slightly disappointed. Good. Ethan straightened in his chair. Basically, if anything ever happened, I could help manage your finances. What kind of help? Oh, paying bills, handling taxes, talking to the bank, managing investments, if necessary. I nodded thoughtfully. And the house? What about it? Could you sell it? His answer came too quickly. Only if it benefited you. Not no, only if. And my savings. I'd manage them. My retirement income. I'd deposit it. My investments. I'd oversee them. My property taxes. I'd handle them. My insurance. I'd renew everything. He was becoming more confident with every answer. Exactly what David wanted. I looked down again. What if we disagreed? He smiled patiently. Mom, you trust me. Not a question. A statement. I looked into his eyes. I used to. The room became completely silent. Melissa immediately jumped in. Stephanie, I know emotions are involved. They are. But Richard would have wanted... I looked up sharply. What did you say? She hesitated. I just meant... No, I interrupted quietly. What exactly would Richard have wanted? Neither of them answered. Because neither of them knew. They hadn't read the letter. They didn't know about the clause. They didn't know Richard had already seen this possibility years before. Ethan finally spoke. Dad trusted me. I held his gaze. Did he? For the first time all evening, he looked uncertain. Only for a second. Then he recovered. Of course he did. I slowly closed the folder. Then tell me something. Why does this document become effective immediately? The smile disappeared from Melissa's face. Ethan blinked. What? It says... I tapped the page. Effective immediately upon execution. He looked at the document, then back at me. Oh, that's standard. Is it? Yes. No, I answered calmly. It isn't. Silence. Melissa spoke quickly. We can always change that. Can you? Of course. Without rewriting the document, neither of them answered, because they couldn't. The confidence that had carried them through dinner began cracking. Just a little. Enough for me to see. I leaned back in my chair. I'm glad I took the time to read everything. Ethan forced a smile. See? I told you there wasn't any rush. I looked directly at him. No. You said I could sign tonight. His mouth opened, then closed. Lily quietly set down her fork. She hadn't spoken a single word all evening, but now she looked directly at her father. And for the first time, there was disappointment in her eyes instead of fear. I saw Ethan notice it. His jaw tightened, then his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen. His expression changed instantly. Not panic, something closer to irritation. He rejected the call without answering. Seconds later, the phone buzzed again. Same caller. Again, he declined it. Melissa whispered, "Who is it?" No one. Lily looked at the screen before he turned it over. I noticed her expression. Recognition. She knew the name. I made a mental note. Whatever call Ethan kept refusing, it mattered. Very much. And somehow, I had a feeling it wasn't family. The room never quite recovered after that second phone call. Something had shifted. Until then, Ethan had been leading the conversation with quiet confidence. Now, his attention kept drifting toward the phone lying face down beside his plate. Every few minutes, it buzzed again, vibrating just enough to make the water glass beside it tremble. Melissa noticed. So did Lily. And so did I. No one said anything. Finally, Ethan picked up the phone and forced a smile. "Excuse me for just a second." He stood and walked toward the kitchen. "I have to take this." As soon as he disappeared around the corner, I heard his voice drop. "I told you not tonight." There was a pause. "No." I said Friday. Another pause. "I'm handling it." Then silence. Melissa quickly stood. "I'll go check on him." Lily looked at me the moment her mother left the dining room. She leaned across the table, her voice barely above a whisper. "Grandma." "Yes, sweetheart." "That number's been calling him all week." "You've seen it before." She nodded. "He always goes outside to answer." "Do you know who it is?" "I don't. But every time they call..." She swallowed. "Mom and Dad start fighting afterward." I reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. "You've been carrying a lot by yourself." Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know who to tell." "You did the right thing." "I was scared." "I know." She lowered her voice even more. "Grandma, what is it? Dad keeps saying if this doesn't work." She glanced toward the kitchen. "We'll lose everything." Before I could ask another question, footsteps approached. Lily immediately sat back in her chair. Ethan returned first. Melissa followed a few seconds later. His smile was back, but it wasn't convincing anymore. "I'm sorry," he said. "Business." I nodded. "Must be important." "It can wait." He sat down again, though he seemed unable to keep still. His fingers tapped the edge of the leather portfolio. Then he looked directly at me. "Mom? I really think we're overcomplicating this." "Are we?" "Yes. We're family." There it was again. Family. He used the word whenever he wanted me to stop asking questions. I folded my hands calmly. I have one more. Go ahead. If I signed these papers tonight, when would you start using them? He smiled. Hopefully never. That's not what I asked. He hesitated. Well, they're active immediately. So, technically, I could help any time. I nodded slowly. And what if I decided tomorrow I changed my mind? His smile disappeared. You wouldn't? That's not what I asked, Melissa interrupted quickly. Stephanie, I think you're getting lost in legal details. No, I answered quietly. I think I'm finally paying attention to them. Silence. The room felt noticeably colder. Then Ethan did something I hadn't expected. He pushed the papers away. Fine. If you don't trust me, his voice cracked just enough to sound wounded. Maybe I should just leave. He stood. Melissa looked surprised. Ethan, no. He shook his head dramatically. I've tried. I've worried. I've done everything I could. If Mom thinks I'm trying to steal from her... He let the sentence hang unfinished. Then he looked at Lily. Come on. We're done. Lily didn't move. Neither did I. This wasn't the angry explosion David had predicted. This was something else. Manipulation. He was trying to make me stop him. Trying to make me apologize. Trying to make me say, No, Ethan, sit down. I know you only want what's best. Instead, I simply said, I'm sorry you feel that way. His expression changed instantly. He hadn't expected that answer. Not at all. Melissa tried another approach. Stephanie, I think Ethan just needs to know you appreciate everything he's trying to do. I looked at her. What exactly is he trying to do? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Because the truthful answer would have destroyed everything. At that exact moment, the doorbell rang. Everyone froze. Ethan frowned. Were you expecting someone? No. Melissa walked toward the front window. I don't recognize that car. Ethan muttered something under his breath and opened the front door. Standing outside was a man in his early 50s wearing a dark jacket with a messenger bag over one shoulder. Can I help you? The man looked at a clipboard. I'm looking for Ethan Wilson. That's me. My name is Victor Reynolds. I'm a licensed process server. The entire room went silent. I have legal documents requiring your signature. Ethan's face lost all color. This isn't a good time. I'm afraid I don't have a choice. Victor held out the envelope. You've been difficult to reach. Melissa hurried toward the door. What is this about? I can't discuss the contents. I only need to verify Mr. Wilson's identity. He looked directly at Ethan. Are you Ethan James Wilson? For a brief second, I thought Ethan might deny it. Instead, he answered quietly. Yes. Victor handed him the envelope. You've been served. Then he turned and walked back toward his car. The front door closed. No one moved. Ethan stared at the envelope as though it might explode. Melissa reached for it. What is it? He pulled it away. Nothing. Let me see. I said it's nothing. His voice was sharper than I'd ever heard. Lily flinched. I watched silently. Then Ethan finally opened the envelope. Several papers slid out. His eyes moved rapidly across the first page. The blood drained from his face. Melissa grabbed the second page before he could stop her. Oh my God! Neither of them realized they had spoken out loud. I quietly picked up my coffee. What happened? No. Ethan folded the papers quickly. It's private. Melissa looked at him in disbelief. They're suing you. He glared at her. Be quiet. For how much? I said be quiet. The room exploded into silence. Lily looked from her father to her mother. Dad? What's going on? No one answered. I didn't ask another question. I didn't have to. Whatever was inside those papers, it was real. And it was serious. Ethan stuffed the documents back into the envelope. We're leaving. Melissa nodded immediately. Without another word, they gathered their things. Lily remained seated. Ethan? I spoke calmly. He stopped at the front door. Yes, I hope whatever problem you're facing. I paused. You solve it honestly. For a moment, he couldn't look at me. Then he opened the door. We'll talk later. No, I answered softly. I think next time we'll have lawyers present. He froze, only for a second. Then he walked out. The front door closed behind him. The silence that followed felt almost unreal. Lily remained sitting at the table. She hadn't moved. Finally, she looked at me. Grandma? Yes. I don't want to go home. My heart broke. I stood, walked around the table, and wrapped my arms around her. You don't have to stay tonight. She buried her face against my shoulder. I heard Mom and Dad arguing yesterday. What about... They said if they couldn't get your signature, she began crying. Everything was over. I gently stroked her hair. It's all right. No. She shook her head. It isn't. She looked up at me, tears running down her face. I didn't tell you everything. I felt my pulse quicken. What do you mean? She wiped her eyes. I have something. What? I copied Dad's computer. I stared at her. What? He left it unlocked last week. I saved everything onto a flash drive. My heart began pounding. Everything. She nodded. Emails. Bank records. Messages. She reached into the pocket of her sweatshirt, then slowly placed a small black USB drive into my hand. I think, her voice trembled, I think this is what they've really been trying to hide. I looked down at the tiny flash drive resting in my palm. It weighed almost nothing. Yet, somehow, it suddenly felt heavier than everything else we had uncovered. Because if Lily was right, the truth about Ethan's plan wasn't just recorded anymore. It was documented, in his own files. And tomorrow, David Harper was going to see every single one of them. I didn't sleep much that Friday night, not because I was anxious, because I couldn't stop looking at the small black flash drive lying on my nightstand. Lily had risked everything to bring it to me. If Ethan discovered what she had done, I had no doubt he would see it as another betrayal. The thought of that sweet 17-year-old carrying such a burden alone filled me with both pride and heartbreak. Around 6 the next morning, Lily was already awake. She sat quietly at my kitchen table wearing one of my oversized sweaters, her hands wrapped around a mug of hot chocolate instead of coffee. You always wake up this early? I asked. She smiled weakly. Not usually. I just couldn't sleep. Neither could I. For a few minutes, we simply sat together listening to the old grandfather clock in the hallway. Finally, Lily looked at me. Grandma? Yes. Are you mad at Dad? I thought carefully before answering. I'm heartbroken. That's different. She nodded slowly. I still love him. So do I. She looked surprised. You do? He's my son. The words caught in my throat. I don't know if I'll ever stop loving him. I looked down into my coffee. But loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy your life. Lily reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I wish he could hear you say that. So do I. By 9:30 that morning, we were back in David Harper's office. Karen arrived a few minutes later. Rachel joined us shortly after. The conference room felt different now. There was a quiet confidence in the air. Not because we believed the battle was over, because we finally had enough pieces to see the entire picture. David looked at the flash drive. So, this is the surprise. Lily nodded nervously. I copied everything I could. David smiled kindly. You did something very brave. I was scared. Being brave doesn't mean you weren't scared. It means you acted anyway. Lily gave the smallest smile. David plugged the flash drive into his office computer. The first folder opened immediately. Emails, the second. Financial statements, the third. Scanned documents, the fourth. Messages. David clicked carefully through each folder while the rest of us watched in silence. For nearly 20 minutes, no one spoke. Occasionally, he printed a document. Sometimes he highlighted a page. Once he quietly muttered, "Interesting." Then he opened an email thread. His expression changed. Karen noticed immediately. What? David didn't answer. Instead, he enlarged the screen. Subject: Cash flow emergency. Several emails between Ethan and someone named Mark Benson. The first message was only 3 weeks old. You promised payment by Friday. No more extensions. Ethan's reply came 2 hours later. I'm getting access to family assets soon. You'll have your money. The room became completely silent. Rachel whispered, My God. David continued reading. Another message. Don't fail again. This is your last chance. Then Ethan replied, It won't fail. My mother's paperwork is almost ready. Lily looked down at the floor. She already knew. She simply hadn't understood what it meant. I closed my eyes. There it was. Not suspicion, not theory. His own words, family assets, my paperwork, my money. David printed the emails without saying a word, then opened another folder. Bank statements, several business accounts, personal credit cards, loan balances, supplier invoices. Karen quietly leaned forward. Oh. David looked at her. You see it. She nodded. He isn't behind? No. He's drowning. We all looked toward her. Karen pointed to several numbers. These debts overlap. He borrowed against one account to pay another. Then borrowed again. She turned another page. And this. She looked genuinely shocked. He mortgaged his own business equipment twice. Rachel frowned. Is that even legal? Not if both lenders think they're first. David nodded slowly. This explains the pressure. It explains everything. Then came the biggest surprise. David opened a folder labeled Attorney. Inside was correspondence between Ethan and another lawyer, not David. Someone else. The subject line read, Conservatorship Strategy. My stomach tightened. David quietly began reading. The attorney wrote, Medical documentation remains your weakest point. Without physician support, success is uncertain. Ethan answered, We're working on that. Family already notices memory issues. I felt sick. Family already notices. He was already telling people, before the dinner, before the missing check, before anything. Rachel looked horrified. He'd already started lying. David nodded. Months ago. Another email appeared. Has Stephanie become more forgetful recently? Ethan's response came almost immediately. Not really, but she gets emotional easily. That should help. I covered my mouth. Not really. He admitted it himself. Everything he had been saying about my memory. Everything he told Rachel. Everything he planned to tell doctors. Everything he planned to tell relatives. He knew it wasn't true. He wrote it himself. David quietly printed every page. Then Lily suddenly spoke. There's one more folder. David looked at her. Which one? She pointed. Hidden. He searched again. Sure enough, one hidden folder appeared. Its name was simple. House. David opened it. Inside were photographs. My house, every room, the backyard, garage, property survey, insurance documents, even photographs of Richard's office. I stared in disbelief. When did he take these? Lily answered softly. Last month. He told Mom he wanted measurements. My heart sank. Measurements, not photographs. More documents. Real estate market reports. Estimated resale value. Potential renovation costs. Projected sale price. Karen slowly shook her head. He wasn't planning to manage your house. He was preparing to sell it. No one spoke. There wasn't anything left to say. Finally, David removed his glasses. I think we're done. I looked at him. Done. We know enough. More than enough. Rachel asked quietly, what happens now? David folded every document neatly into separate folders. Now. He looked directly at me. We stop reacting. We act. He reached into his briefcase, then placed one document in front of me. What is this? A petition. For what? To formally challenge any future conservatorship attempt. He placed another beside it. And this? Notice preserving all evidence. Another. Temporary financial protection requests. Karen smiled. I like this part. David smiled back. I thought you would. He looked at me again. Stephanie? Yes. Everything changes now. Why? Because yesterday? He tapped Ethan's emails. You had suspicions. Today? He tapped the recordings. You have admissions. Then the bank records. Financial motive. Then Lily's photographs. Planning. Finally the hidden house folder. And intent. He leaned back. I've handled elder exploitation cases for 38 years. This is one of the strongest evidence files I've ever seen. I stared at the mountain of papers spread across the conference table. Just 1 week earlier, I had been a widow sitting alone in my kitchen wondering whether I had somehow misplaced my retirement check. Now, I understood that the missing check had never really been the case. It had simply been the thread. And once we pulled it, the entire sweater unraveled. As everyone began organizing documents, my phone vibrated. A message from Ethan. Mom, can we talk only 4 words? Nothing more. I looked at David. He nodded. Read the next one. Almost immediately, another message appeared. Things got out of hand last night. Then another. I think we misunderstood each other. Karen quietly smiled. Interesting. Rachel crossed her arms. He's nervous. Another vibration. This one was longer. Please don't make any decisions until we've had a chance to sit down together. David looked at me. Notice the wording. I read it again. Not. I'm sorry. Not. I took your check. Not. I lied. Instead, don't make any decisions. He wasn't trying to repair our relationship. He was trying to regain control. I slowly locked my phone without replying. David smiled. Good. Let him wonder. Then he gathered every folder into one large case. I think, he said quietly, it's time your son learned something. What? David looked directly into my eyes. The woman he believed was too old to protect herself. He closed the briefcase with a firm click. Has been preparing her response all week. And for the first time since that terrible dinner, I smiled. Not because I wanted revenge, because I finally knew something Ethan didn't. He thought the story ended with my signature. It was actually about to begin with his confession. Monday morning arrived brighter than any day the previous week. The sky over Columbus was clear and sunlight poured through my kitchen windows as though nothing extraordinary had happened. But everything had changed. The frightened widow who had searched desperately through her purse for a missing retirement check no longer existed. In her place sat a woman who had spent a lifetime caring for others and had finally decided to care for herself. At 9 o'clock sharp, David Harper, Karen Brooks, and Rachel arrived at my house. We gathered around the dining room table one final time. David placed a legal folder in front of me. "Today," he said calmly, "we're going to end this." I nodded. "How?" "We've already notified the bank to preserve every record," Karen added. "The attempted deposit surveillance photographs, account records, and fraud alerts have all been secured." David continued. "We've also preserved the recordings, Lily's photographs, and Ethan's emails." Rachel folded her arms. "So now," David smiled, "now we give Ethan one final opportunity to tell the truth." I looked at him. "And if he doesn't, he'll answer to the law instead." At exactly 10:30, Ethan arrived. He came alone. No Melissa, no Lily. He looked exhausted. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes and his beard had begun to grow unevenly, as though he hadn't bothered to shave over the weekend. When I opened the front door, he forced a weak smile. "Mom, come in." The moment he stepped into the living room, he stopped. David stood beside the fireplace. Karen sat quietly near the dining table. Rachel leaned against the kitchen doorway. For several seconds, Ethan simply stared. "What is this?" David stepped forward. "My name is David Harper. I represented Richard Wilson." Recognition flashed across Ethan's face. "I remember you." "I'm sure you do." Ethan looked back at me. "Mom, I thought we were just talking." "We are," I answered calmly. "But we're all talking." His shoulders stiffened. "I don't like being ambushed," David replied evenly. Neither did Stephanie. Silence settled over the room. David motioned toward a chair. "Please sit." Reluctantly, Ethan did. For a few moments, no one spoke. Then David began. "Ethan, we're here because several serious matters require clarification." "I don't know what you're talking about." David wasn't surprised. He opened the first folder. "On Sunday afternoon, your wife attempted to deposit Stephanie Wilson's retirement check into her personal account." Ethan immediately looked at me. "Mom, I can explain." Karen slid a color photograph across the table. Bank surveillance. Melissa holding my retirement check. The timestamp clearly visible. Ethan's eyes widened. "Where did you get that?" Karen answered calmly. "From the bank." He looked down, then quickly recovered. Melissa was only helping. David slid another page forward. "The signature on the check was forged." "No," Ethan answered immediately. "I don't know anything about that." David quietly placed a signature comparison beside it. "My mother must have signed," Karen interrupted. "I've personally reviewed Stephanie's signatures for almost 40 years. "That isn't hers." Silence. David opened the second folder. "The recording." Ethan's face changed. "What recording?" Without answering, David pressed play. The room filled with Ethan's own voice. "By Monday it'll be handled. Mom's been slipping." People believe what they already expect to believe. Ethan's face drained of color. He looked at me in complete disbelief. "You..." I met his eyes. "Yes." His breathing became noticeably faster. "You recorded us. I recorded myself. You happened to tell the truth. For the first time since entering my house." He had no answer. David calmly opened another folder. "The emails." He placed printed pages on the table. Ethan glanced at them, then immediately looked away. David read aloud. "I'm getting access to family assets soon. You'll have your money." Another page. "My mother's paperwork is almost ready." Another. "Not really. But she gets emotional easily." "That should help." The silence became unbearable. Rachel finally spoke. "When did you become this person?" Ethan rubbed both hands across his face. "You don't understand." Rachel's voice broke. "Then help me understand." "I borrowed money." "We know." "I got behind." "We know." "I thought I could fix it. By stealing from Mom." "No!" He slammed both hands onto the table. "I wasn't stealing." I looked at him quietly. What would you call it? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. David spoke again. Ethan, look at me. Slowly, Ethan did. I've practiced estate law for nearly 4 decades. I've heard every explanation imaginable. So I'll ask you once. Did you knowingly participate in a plan to obtain financial control over Stephanie Wilson's assets? The room became perfectly still. For nearly 30 seconds, no one breathed. Finally, Ethan whispered, Yes. Rachel covered her mouth. Karen quietly lowered her eyes. I simply closed mine. Not because I was shocked, because hearing my son admit it out loud hurt in a way no recording ever could. David remained calm. Did you knowingly participate in creating a false narrative regarding Stephanie's mental capacity? Another long silence. Yes. Were you aware Melissa attempted to deposit Stephanie's retirement check? Yes. Did you intend to use the financial power of attorney immediately after it was signed? His shoulders collapsed. Yes. Every answer felt like another door closing, not only on his future, on the family we once had. Tears rolled down Ethan's face. I never wanted it to go this far. I finally spoke. Then why did it? He looked at me. I owed too much. I thought I could fix everything. Then I'd put everything back. I shook my head slowly. You don't rebuild trust with stolen money. He began crying openly. I'm sorry. You have no idea how sorry I am. I believed he was sorry, but I also knew something important. He wasn't sorry before he got caught. That mattered. David quietly opened one final folder. Richard asked me to show you this if today ever came. He handed Ethan a copy of the supplemental estate clause. Ethan frowned as he read. Then his eyes widened. No. He turned the page again. No. David spoke softly. Your father included a forfeiture provision. Ethan looked at me. What does that mean? I answered gently. It means your father believed love should never reward betrayal. David continued. By attempting financial exploitation against Stephanie, you have legally forfeited your inheritance under Richard's estate plan. The words seemed to knock the air out of him. My inheritance, it's gone. David nodded once. Yes. Ethan lowered his head into his hands. For several minutes, the only sound in the room was his quiet crying. Finally, he whispered, Dad knew. David answered honestly. He hoped he was wrong. I hoped he was wrong too. I looked at my son. I prayed I was wrong. He couldn't look at me. Just then, another knock sounded at the front door. Rachel opened it. Lily stepped inside. She looked nervously around the room before her eyes found her father. Dad? Ethan stood slowly. I'm sorry. She began crying immediately. I didn't want this. I know. I love you. He nodded through tears. I know. Then she did something none of us expected. She hugged him. Not because he deserved it, because she was still his daughter. Watching them, I realized something. Compassion and accountability are not enemies. You can love someone and still refuse to let them keep hurting you. Before leaving, Ethan turned toward me one last time. I don't expect forgiveness. I answered quietly. Forgiveness isn't the same as trust. He nodded. I understand. I hope someday, his voice trembled, I become someone Dad wouldn't be ashamed of. I looked at Richard's photograph above the fireplace, then back at my son. I hope so too. He walked slowly out the front door. This time, he didn't look back. Later that afternoon, David confirmed that the conservatorship preparation had been abandoned, the fraudulent power of attorney would never take effect, and the evidence package had been preserved for the authorities. Ethan and Melissa would remain under investigation for attempted forgery and financial exploitation, and the fraudulent banking activity had been fully documented. The legal battle was ending, but the emotional one would take much longer to heal. Still, as I stood on my front porch watching the sun sink behind the maple tree Richard had planted decades earlier, I realized something extraordinary. Ethan had tried to take my independence. Instead, he had reminded me how strong I still was. 3 months passed before life began to feel ordinary again. Not the same. It would never be the same. But ordinary enough that I could wake up without immediately thinking about recordings, forged signatures, court documents, or betrayal. Winter settled gently over Columbus. The maple tree in my front yard stood bare its branches, reaching toward the gray sky exactly as they had every winter since Richard planted it more than 30 years earlier. I found comfort in that tree. Seasons changed, storms came, leaves fell, yet every spring it found the strength to bloom again. I wanted to believe people could do the same. The investigation moved more slowly than television dramas would have you believe. Karen kept me informed whenever she could. The bank completed its internal investigation and officially confirmed the attempted fraudulent deposit of my retirement check. Their security records, teller statements, and surveillance footage matched everything David had already collected. The district attorney's office reviewed the evidence carefully. Eventually, Ethan and Melissa accepted responsibility for their actions rather than forcing everyone through a lengthy trial. Part of that agreement required restitution, financial counseling, and strict legal supervision regarding future financial matters. The attempted conservatorship was permanently abandoned, and every document connected to it became part of the official record. Justice, I discovered, is rarely loud. Sometimes it arrives quietly, one signed document at a time. The hardest part wasn't the legal process. It was learning how to live with the empty space where trust used to be. For weeks, I found myself reaching for the phone whenever something funny happened. I would see an old television show Ethan loved as a boy or hear a baseball score that reminded me of the Saturdays Richard spent coaching his Little League team. Without thinking, I would almost call my son. Then I would remember. Not what he had done, who he had become. Grief returned in strange ways. Not grief for Richard this time. Grief for the family I thought I still had. David once told me something during one of our meetings. You can mourn someone who is still alive. At the time, I didn't fully understand. Now I did. Rachel visited almost every other weekend. Sometimes we cooked together. Sometimes we watched old movies Richard loved. Sometimes we sat in complete silence, each of us reading our own books while snow drifted quietly outside. Those afternoons reminded me that family is not measured by who shares your last name. It is measured by who stays when staying becomes difficult. One Saturday, Rachel looked around my kitchen and smiled. "You laugh more now." I blinked. "Do I?" "You do." "I didn't notice." "You don't apologize every time you ask for help anymore." I laughed softly. "I guess I don't." She reached across the table. "Dad would be proud of you." I looked toward Richard's old photograph hanging beside the dining room. "I hope so." "I know so." Lily became part of my everyday life. At first, she came only on weekends, then Wednesday evenings after school, then almost every Sunday afternoon. Sometimes we baked cookies, sometimes we worked in the garden, sometimes she sat at Richard's old desk doing homework while I knitted beside the fireplace. Neither of us needed constant conversation. Being together was enough. One afternoon, while we were organizing old photo albums, Lily hesitated before asking, "Grandma." "Yes." "Do you hate Dad?" I closed the album carefully. "No." "You don't?" "No. I hate what he chose, but I don't hate him." She looked relieved. "I've been afraid I had to choose." I immediately took both her hands. "Never. You are allowed to love your father. You are also allowed to recognize when he was wrong. Those two things can exist together." She leaned over and hugged me. "I don't want to lose either of you." My eyes filled with tears. "You won't lose me." "I promise." Several months later, David invited me to his office one final time. "This is the last estate update." He handed me a folder. I smiled. I suppose Richard would be disappointed if I didn't keep everything organized. David laughed. He'd probably reorganize my filing cabinets. That sounds like him. We reviewed my updated will together. Rachel remained exactly where Richard had intended. The Charitable Healthcare Foundation remained unchanged. Then we came to Lily's section. David looked at me. "Are you certain?" I smiled. "I've never been more certain." Richard had written years earlier that Lily understood what money was supposed to do. He was right. Money should protect people, not control them, not divide them, not replace love. A significant portion of my estate would eventually pass to Lily, not because Ethan had failed, but because Lily had chosen honesty when dishonesty would have been easier. That mattered. Character always matters. As for Ethan, the first letter arrived almost 6 months after everything happened. Not an email, not a text message. A handwritten letter. The envelope sat unopened on my kitchen table for nearly 2 days before I gathered the courage to read it. Inside were 4 pages. No excuses, no blaming debt, no blaming Melissa, no blaming stress, only responsibility. He admitted that somewhere along the way he had started measuring success by money instead of integrity. He wrote that every compromise had seemed temporary. Every lie had felt justified, until eventually he barely recognized himself. Near the end of the letter, one paragraph made me stop reading. "Mom, the worst part isn't losing the inheritance. It's realizing I traded my father's respect and my mother's trust for money that never solved anything. If you never forgive me, I'll understand. but I promise I'll spend the rest of my life trying to become someone worthy of being your son again." I folded the letter carefully, then I cried. Not because everything was fixed, because healing had finally become possible. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't a door you open all at once. Sometimes it's a path people earn one honest step at a time. Nearly a year after that terrible dinner, I sat on my front porch on the first warm afternoon of spring. The maple tree had tiny green buds again. Birds chirped from branches that had looked lifeless only weeks earlier. Lily pulled into the driveway carrying 2 bags of flowers for the garden. Rachel arrived an hour later with homemade pie. For the first time in a very long time, laughter filled my yard again. I looked toward the empty chair beside me, the one where Richard used to sit. "I think we're going to be okay," I whispered. The wind moved gently through the branches above me. Maybe it was only the breeze, or maybe, just maybe, Richard already knew. Because in the end, my son did steal my retirement check. He tried to steal my independence. He tried to steal my reputation. He even tried to steal the future Richard and I had built together. But he failed to steal the one thing that mattered most, my strength. And once I remembered I still had that, everything else slowly found its way back home. Every family hopes love alone will protect it. But love without honesty can become an invitation for manipulation. I learned that setting boundaries does not mean you love someone less. Sometimes it is the clearest expression of self-respect and the only way to stop enabling harmful behavior. Growing older does not make you less valuable, less capable, or less deserving of respect. Your lifetime of work, sacrifice, and wisdom deserves protection. Never let anyone convince you that asking questions makes you difficult or that protecting what you've earned makes you selfish. Trust is a gift, not an obligation, and even those closest to us must earn it. I also learned that darkness rarely disappears all at once. It fades because good people choose courage. Karen chose integrity. David chose justice. Rachel chose loyalty. Lily chose honesty even when it was frightening. Their choices reminded me that one person's betrayal does not erase the goodness of everyone else. If this story touched your heart, I'd truly love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done if you had been in my place? Have you or someone you know ever faced betrayal from a family member? Please share your experience in the comments. Your story may encourage someone else who feels alone today. If you enjoyed this journey, please like this video and subscribe for more heartfelt family stories about resilience, justice, forgiveness, and hope. And before you go, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. I always enjoy reading your comments, and they remind me that no matter where we live, kindness and courage speak the same language.